This conference will now be recorded.
Stand and join us in our pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our salute to the North Carolina flag. I salute the flag of North Carolina, pledge to the old North State, love, loyalty, and faith. Thank you all. We go through our agenda. Secretary will call the roll to determine a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Start with the TSERS board. Gail Falwell. Here. Barbara Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Truitt. I didn't hear Catherine Truitt. Dirk German.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. German. Greg Patterson. Present.
Yes, sir.
Jeffrey Winstead. Present. John Eppinghausen. Present. Joshua Smith.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Lance Brewer.
Good morning. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Linda Gunter. Did not hear Ms. Gunter. Margaret Reeder. Not here, Ms. Reeder. Oliver Holly.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Holly. Vernon Gammon. Did not hear Mr. Gammon. Just one call through the people that I missed. Catherine Sherman. Linda Gunter. Margaret Reeder. Vernon Gammon. We have a quorum on both boards. All right, on the LGERS board, Treasurer Falwell. Here. Brenda Howerton. Did not hear Ms. Howerton. Catherine Truitt. Not hear Ms. Truitt. Clee Atkinson.
Good morning. Here.
Thank you. Greg Patterson. Here. Homer Dearman.
Here.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morse. Did not hear Mr. Morse. Kevin Gordon. Did not hear Mr. Gordon. Lance Brewer.
Here. Good morning.
Thank you again. Melody Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Bond.
Good morning. Here.
Thank you. Tony Brown. Here. Thank you. And Vernon Gammon. All right, let me circle back again. Brenda Howerton. Catherine Truitt. Jeffrey Morse. Kevin Gordon. Vernon Gammon. And Miss Linda Gunter as well. Good morning.
Good. Members and folks in the audience, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online with other board materials. We ask that you mute your phone and or computer during the process. And when speaking, please identify yourself. When taking the roll call without objection, somebody who makes a motion or a second to motion will be considered a yes vote. No objection to that. That'll help with efficiency. Board members, if you must leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure. If you return, please announce your return. These items must be recorded in the meeting minutes. Likewise, please state your name before speaking. And finally, most importantly, any text or other recorded communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal phones, are considered public record to the extent they concern the business of the meeting. We have an ethics awareness and identification of conflicts of interest or potential conflicts. Members, please take a moment, both elders and teasers, to review the agenda. Does anyone have an actual potential or the appearance of a conflict of interest regarding the matters that are before us? Hearing none, just wanted to notify members and the public that we have SCI evaluations, both for the teasers board members and the elders board members, which are part of the record. Please review the SCI evaluations that have been completed. The Ethics Act requires that any conflicts of interest identified in these evaluations be recorded in meeting minutes. So these evaluation letters will be made part of today's minutes and serve as a periodic reminder of those conflicts that are identified by the Ethics Board. Are there any questions about that? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the, we have a lot of special guests in the audience today, and we'll have an opportunity over the next hour or so to acknowledge and recognize them. But we want to first ask for a motion for the teasers meeting minutes of July 28th.
Motion to amend.
Motion to amend.
Yes, sir.
Jeffrey.
Page 5, minor correction that Benny Brinkman spoke in favor of COLA. Minutes only reflect that he spoke about it rather than in favor of it. And later their comments and what he said, what I'd like to see his actual comments placed in, or at least.
Okay. Then we'll entertain Mrs. Gunter's motion with the understanding that I'm directing staff to make the technical corrections to reflect what Jeffrey just said. Sure. That'd be a second. Do that. Linda, call your motion and make it as amended.
I'll withdraw my motion and approve the minutes with the addition of Benny's complete comments to be included in the minutes. Is that covered?
One clarification, thank you.
Second. Second, motion second being made. The clerk will call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer?
Aye.
Barbara Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you. Pruitt? Dirk German?
Aye.
Thank you. Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Strappinghausen?
Aye.
Joshua Smith?
Aye.
Thank you. Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Margaret Reeder?
Aye.
Thank you. Oliver Holly?
Aye.
And Vernon County?
Yep.
All right.
We now will entertain a motion for the Elders Board to approve the meeting minutes of July 28th. So moved.
Clea Axon, second.
Thank you, Cleve. Thank you, Greg. Motion second being made. Those need to be amended also. Jeffrey. That was, previous amendment was only about the teasers, right?
Yes, sir.
Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Treasurer?
All right.
Brenda Howerton? Catherine Truitt? Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Homer Dearman?
Aye.
Jeffrey Morris? Kevin Gordon? Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Thank you. Melody Brady?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Vaughn?
Aye.
Thank you. That's-
Thank you very much. We're now on to our operations update, and we welcome Rick Lopez and Tanya Bass and Patrick Kinlaw to join us. Rick is Director of Operations. Tanya is Director of Member Services, sometimes known as our call center. And Patrick Kinlaw is our Chief Actuary, who sometimes brings us actuarial joy. So It's well hidden, so you gotta be on the lookout for it. All right. Rick, you have the floor.
Morning, everyone. Rick Lopez, Director of Operations. Be here with you today. Sort of the slides. First slide for retirement processing. You can see that in July, we ended up with almost 4,000 retirements. We had a couple of hundred people actually drop off with all their retirement requests. So we ended up with 3993 was the exact number. We've been working overtime to handle all those turnaround times. And what we have control over, obviously, we request information from employers, and there can be delays there. We also request information from members, and they may be delayed in getting their information too. But what we have in our control, you can see that we're doing pretty good on our turnaround times, and we're sitting around 39.5 days to get that 6E out, to get that option out for them. Just a note though, we also, and I speak to this each time, we also look at all those folks who are diligent in submitting their information along with their employers who are diligent in responding to our request for information. And if everybody does their part, get your application in 60 days or greater, we're sitting on 100% on our turnaround time there. So that's important to note. There are variables outside of our control, but with what we have control over, we're doing a good job there. We're fully staffed now. We've got a retiree who absent with us for a few months. He's back. He's helping us. I've got a couple of new trainees. One came from Texas retirement system, so she already had a handle on things. She's jumped right in. So we're really pointed in the right direction with retirement processing. We know that our second largest retirement month is January, and that's coming up. And we've already gotten almost 2,000 requests for January retirements in. So that could be a higher number than we normally see, but we'll keep an eye on that. Last January, we totaled around 2,600. For our death processing, you can see that we're still experiencing quite a few deaths. We have at least 1,000 deaths monthly for 6 out of the last 12 months from September of 2022. You can see that blip in August there where we had 1,300 plus. Actually brought a retiree on. I have 3 retirees that have come back to work in that death processing section. And we have some pretty good reports that we've been utilizing to identify deaths. The quicker we identify those deaths, the more quickly we can end that monthly retirement benefit. So that's an important component, but also get any beneficiaries paid. So in that number, we'll really see that retiree come back and work with those reports. We picked up an extra report from Burley. It's really detailed. And so we're hoping that that's just a blip from actually really working hard to identify some deaths. But we'll keep an eye on that, obviously. I want to talk a little bit about turnaround times, just very briefly. And I've spoken at this a few times, but I want you guys to understand what they really mean. When we see a turnaround time go up and down, that's at least partially an indication of how quickly operations is doing their part to get somebody paid, because that's in essence what we're doing, we're paying. But we do rely heavily on, in many of our processes, employers submitting retirements. We've seen a delayed response lately. We keep an eye on that. I suspect, can't verify, but I suspect it's due to some vacancies and some people doubling up on their work responsibilities. So that creates more of an outreach for us. We will entertain multiple requests via correspondence and mail. We also will ask our ERG partners to outreach if necessary, and my employer reporting section will also call. But we are seeing delays in that capacity. We're just really trying to keep a handle on that just by really pounding it and trying to get that information repeatedly requested. So anyway, when those workflows come in, when that information comes in, we start working it. And then we may say, okay, well, we've processed it to this point, but we need more information. So we send this back to a beneficiary or back to a prospective retiree. So we keep that workflow open. And as time goes on, and with these multiple requests, if you don't respond after 5 or 6 attempts, two definite correspondences multiple calls, then we'll have to be forced to close that workflow, because otherwise it'd be really hard to determine where we are internally on our turnaround times. Just keeping workflows open constantly. But there's a sweet spot in that. And what we found, particularly in the debt component of things, is that for whatever reason, likely grievance, you're distraught. It's difficult to get a handle on all the things you need to do, because it's not just us that need paperwork. There's so many things in the estate settlement, the things that go into all of this, that what we've decided to do is keep those workflows open a little longer, because I'm finding that we're getting information a little later than we might normally get it. And if I close that workflow on you, then when we get your information, you start at the beginning you start at the back of the line. And I don't want to do that, because it's first come, first served. I want to provide optimal customer service and make sure that we're taking care of beneficiaries. So I'm constantly looking at this and trying to find a good sweet spot for how long we need to keep these workflows open so that we can get all that information, get people paid. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, so everybody really has an understanding of what a turnaround time really is. There's a lot of things.
Last question.
Yes, sir.
What causes a typical delay? I mean, what is it what's the real challenge here? What's a common delay that makes
For
things?
the deaths, a lot of times it's receipt of the death certificate, and we had some conversation about how we might be able to get those more quickly, because that really starts everything off. For retirements, we see a lot of delays in employers' response. When you decide to retire, you go online, you submit, that kicks something out of that for it. It says, hey, we guys vacation leave and sick leave last month of earnings, and we need that to retire. And if we don't get it, then we have a second request. If you're applying way out in advance, that's never a problem, because it might take 3 months, but we're going to get it. But if you're intending to retire, say December 1, and you apply now, and we've made multiple attempts, there's likely going to be a delay. A lot of times it does fall on employer response. It just really depends on the department. But that's what we're seeing a lot of lately, really.
That's fine. Thank you.
Good question, Tony. And I'd also like to add that we have no control or responsibility for how quickly death certificates come out. That's a local control issue, and it's even different per locality as far as their process and their turnaround time. So very often we are subject to them, and it gets particularly frustrating when you're dealing with a state employee or LGERS employee who's killed in the line of duty, and whether it's a DOT worker or a law enforcement officer. And because some of the times they get more delayed as investigations are going on.
We are still working overtime in the death section, and we hired 2 death analysts, and we've got 2 QC positions. We've hired one. She's already in training, well on her way. She actually has 25 years of experience in the previous capacity of death. So the volume of deaths on our end, we feel like we're poised to handle with regard to processing. And responsibility on all parties to get us what we need, but we feel we really put ourselves in a good position to handle that increased volume, sustained volume. For disability section, skip that, that's refund. Yeah. More back. There we go. So you can see in this slide that we've actually taken off what our goal is for turnaround times. I've done that for a reason. Disability has a lot of moving parts. One of the things we're trying to do is break them out. We have any bottlenecks in our process, and so meeting with our supervisor, she made the recommendation, Ellen Nebraska, and it was a solid recommendation. Tom and I discussed it with her manager, and we decided to break things out into what type of case it is. It's an extended short-term case, long-term, disability, retirement, when it was received. when it was sent to our medical board for review, whether or not it was approved, and how long after it was approved it took us to actually pay it. So I'm hoping to get about 6 months of data and start putting some metrics on these things. I'm just trying to take a look if there's anything that needs improvement in that process so we can refine that if necessary. For refunds, you can see that we received over 1,000 refund requests for September of this year. Slightly 30% decrease from last September. Turnaround times are really good with that. We've got a number of people cross-trained. Refund time, if you get us what we need and we get your identification timely, you look at an 8.9-day turnaround time on average right now. That's well below our goal of 20 days. So we're doing a great job with the refunds processing. We also have an outreach program with refunds just to identify people that are not vested and have not contributed for 5+ years, offering them an opportunity if they choose, and giving them the circumstance if they do choose to take a refund. Payroll processing. You can see October payroll has been processed, and that it did include the 4% one time for TSERS, CGERS, and LRS, as well as 2% for the LGERS. And of this, we paid slightly over 354,000 folks, which included 7,200 checks and nearly 35,000 EFT stubs. So my payroll department of 3 has been pretty busy. That's a significant amount of work, and the total gross on that was nearly $837 million. So quite a feat there for a small group who's continually working through other things. We've got the upcoming 1099-R and W-2s. We actually implemented in self-service something that you can see if you're a retiree or disability recipient, where you can actually opt out of getting mailed those forms in. That's something we wanted to do. It saves time. Posts that you have available immediately when you push the button, put it out before we even send the file to our vendor. So that's very helpful in driving people to decide whether or not they need to print their own information. That's cost and time savings. So really happy about that one. And we've literally just put that in this week. So there's going to be a little bit of outreach with our comms team, with Christy Fairley, our communications manager, notifying everyone that that's available to them.
Rick, put a little more information when you said 837 million in gross payments, but then we're looking at 650 here. What did you say a moment ago? You said there's 837 million in gross payments for the month.
For the month of October, including the COLAs, the one-time COLAs.
Okay, that's not what I missed. Okay, so the difference in that, what the board's seeing is the COLA. It's the bonus.
That's
Right.
the bonus. Yeah, make it clear.
Okay, all right. So, but at 660, are we expecting to hit 700 this year?
So the two scales on the graph, the red line is the amount of dollars every month, and that goes with the number on the right. So a typical month right now is about 590 million. It was up to 837 in October with the one-time payment. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it cross 600 million in a typical month very soon.
And the reason I'm highlighting this is that I've talked about the fact that we're getting ready to cross the precipice for the first time in our state history of paying out $7 billion per year in gross benefits out of these plans. That number is going to about $9 billion just over the next few years. So $7 billion a year gross payments going to $9 billion a year over the next few years. Thank you.
We also finished up another project with IRS changes on tax withholdings effective 1/1/23 with a number of exemptions that will no longer be used for federal taxes. Minimum withholding will no longer be used for federal or state taxes. We got a party of 3 do that work, and that is a huge project. And I did want to recognize those guys. And internally, we had our business analyst, his name is Jay Morris. He spearheaded the entire thing, led the project. business requirements. We worked with him to write test case scenarios, and he did a lot of the testing. And on the IT side, we had Josh Dolinger and Matt McCormick. Matt McCormick, sorry. And really, the three of those guys carried this thing all the way through. So they deserve a lot of kudos for that. It's an extraordinary, very good. And they changed forms, and self-service. They implemented things in line of business to separate old versus new, retire today versus if you retire 123. So lots of good work there.
Rick just hit the top 2 points on how that would impact our customer. What they just did.
Well, you're going to see clearly laid out as best as we can do with interpreting IRS language, what you need to do with exemptions, tax elections. Thank you. So look at self-service, next slide. You can see that we had a lot of retirement estimates, 1.5 million retirement estimates over the last 12 months. That could be one person multiple times, but that's a fairly sizable hit on estimates there in self-service. You can also see that we had number of annual benefit statement reviews, nearly 300,000 there. What I do want to point out is maintaining your address online, that's 11,781 pieces of paper we don't have to handle. You did it online if you're a retiree. Same with tax information, nearly 91,000 folks there. And then direct deposits at 60,500. That's all pieces of paper that you used to come in the store that you can take care of effective immediately, except for direct deposit, which is the following month for fraud prevention. And that just shows how useful our self-service has become. And that's what's driving us forward and doing more things on self-service.
It does concern me when we see more retirement estimates than there are people in the plan.
That's why I mentioned that it could be one person that did it 1,000 times.
And I also want to highlight for the board and those present that this beneficiary updates, we are in the 4th or 5th inning of, well, are we in the 9th inning about being, in terms of our ability to do it online?
Beneficiary updates can be done online for actives right now. And we've had over 320,000 of those over the course of the last 12 months. For retirees, that project, we've gathered all the business requirements, test case scenarios being written, and that's going to be prioritized really soon. We're hoping to have that about first quarter. That's something we've been wanting to do. Other things have come in front of it, like the tax effort, and a number of other projects we've been working on. But again, we're hopeful that first quarter we'll get to see an implementation of the election of beneficiaries for retirees.
So 320,000, is that people checking or changing?
It's people updating, changing.
There's a lot of divorces. That can't be.
Not verse.
Not verse.
Turn 18.
Okay. So that's 320,000 changes.
It's 320,000 changes and 320,000 less pieces of paper.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, seems like a lot. So, and it gives me an opportunity to tell the board that starting early next year, when we get fully on board with the ability to do this online for our retirees, people my age and above generally, we're going to be partnering with the League of Municipalities, State Employees Association, County Commissioner Association, Police Chiefs, Sheriff's Association, and some others I'm probably forgetting, to launch an effort that people really need to be checking their beneficiaries. Two saddest days in our lives at the Treasurer's Office is when we have somebody who's killed in line of duty. Second saddest day is when we realize their affairs weren't in order. And they've gotten married since, they've had children since, and unfortunately, as cold-hearted as this sounds, we're stuck with the words on paper. Whatever the words are on that paper is what we're stuck with, no matter what our heart says. So that's why this is going to be so important for us to partner with these folks. For everybody, if they're going to check their smoke detector once a year, maybe they should check this once a year. And it's just very important work. We appreciate all you're doing to make this easy going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bass.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tanya
Everybody
Bass.
speak up just a little bit because the air is going in here.
Okay, sure, yes. Good morning, I'm Tanya Bass, the Director of Member Services. Services consists of our Education Retirement Group and our call center. This is an exciting time for Member Services right now. We have been working on implementing a new phone platform, NICE system. And we are excited to say that we was able to go live on September 21st, right in front of open enrollment. And we had Sharon Bird, who is the manager of data processing, just got a new title, I'm sorry, business analyst and the learning and development group. She spearheaded this. She was the project manager on this and she kept us all on task. So I will give thanks out to her, keeping us on task and being able to keep our mark of getting it in place before open enrollment. With the new telephone system, it comes with screen pops, which allows the members to pass through the counselors with the identification authenticated, which reduces the time that the counselors use to verify the caller. We now offer callback assist multiple times by the members holding to speak to a counselor. And callback assist allows the members to enter their phone number and be called back without losing their place in line. And this is important because with our payroll for retirees on Tuesday with the one-time supplement, it proved how strong it was because between Monday and Tuesday, we had over 1,200 members that was able to use callback assist that we could have possibly had as abandoned call. So that is great news to have. And then for the 1 week we did have it in September, we was able to answer 800 calls for the callback assist. The members no longer have to wait in silence. We have added some hold music, a variety of selection of music, and at times people would have hung up because they didn't know who was still there because it's just dead silence. So that's a good thing for us right now that we have going for us. We are currently working to have our emails filtered through this NICE system based on categories, which will automatically route to a counselor that's skilled in that queue, which will reduce a counselor from having to review each piece of email that comes through us and categorize it, to send it to someone to respond to. We are still working to fill vacancies, but we've been able to move through that process a whole lot quicker working with HR, who has put in a continuous postings for us, which allows us to keep applications in the mix. So when we do have a vacancy because someone has moved over to another department in operations or moved on to another position, we have applications on hand to go ahead and try to quickly fill those positions. So that's helped us out tremendously. Since July, we have been able to fill 11 positions in the call center. And when we start to go through the slides, you can see how much that has helped us a lot. We have also began training additional counselors on disability, because with the loss of counselors moving on to other departments or on to other jobs, we lost trained counselors that was trained to handle disability calls. And so with the call center having now majority of the staff being new, they have acquired a skill set. So we have taken counselors that has been here 6 months or more. If they prove that they have are able to take on another skill set, we have 2 training classes coming up within the next month to go ahead and assist with that queue. In the meantime, what we do is we assist the call center by having retirement group counselors, which is our ERG section, to assist in that queue so that we do not lose people from being assisted in that queue. Also, we have team leads and the full ERG staff assist on high call volume days such as paydays, the day after the holiday, and then when we have peak times such as one-time colas and call volume is going to be high. So I'm very proud of the work that the team is doing. I'm very proud of the supervisors working quickly trying to fill those positions. I'm very happy to be working with HR to keep us continuous postings going on. And I'm very happy to be working with Rick to help us when we come up with something we see that could help reduce call volume. And Christy Fairley, who is the communications manager, who get things to her when she get it out there on the website very quickly to update the members of what we have going on in the call center, to give the members the option to either call back another day or be informed up front without speaking to someone on the phone. So with that being said, I could go ahead and go into my first set of slides, which is going to represent the education retirement group correspondence. This chart shows the number of pieces of correspondence or letters received and the time it takes for counselors to respond. We have been able to bring the times down largely due to filling of vacant positions, mainly with experienced staff on the call center. We have had call center staff be promoted into our education retirement group section, which brings over the retirement knowledge piece, so they're not starting from the beginning, so they can easily step in and start responding to correspondence or assisting with legal correspondence, and also educating members through webinars and virtual appointments. We've been able to get the correspondence down, but as you can see in August, we had a spike, which could result from less faxing and asking members to mail or upload documents. Also, I implemented a more robust QC process to check the accuracy with the new staff hired. And in the last 90 days, we've received over 17 pieces of correspondence from members.
17,000.
17,000. On this slide, you will see our meeting and webinar slide. This chart shows number of group meetings held for the current fiscal year to date. So far this year, we've had over 1,200 members and attendance, and 100 employers attend. We've trained 5 additional counselors to be able to conduct more training webinars and create videos to help educate members and employees. And the next slide. On this slide, it will show our visitors and canceling session slides. In April, we was able to open back up the front desk here, but because we had people visiting the office trying to drop off forms, get forms notarized, or feeling like they just need someone to talk to, we had the call volume was very high back in April. So sometimes getting on the phone, people just felt like it was easier to come here. So in April, we did a soft launch with having someone to come sit in the front desk, a trained counselor. So when someone came into the office, they didn't have to sit or try to hope someone come through to help them with the officer at the front desk. So we have someone sitting there now that can ask basic questions when they drop off forms or possibly get something notarized. And they leave that here with us. And then we have our imaging department pick it up and upload it in the system to go ahead and get that work in. So we start working on that. We modified our appointment schedule to 10 appointments a day. We used to have 15. And what we're finding with that still now, recently, we're having people now cancel appointments. And people, I think they're getting those estimates that Rick is talking about and realizing I can't do this right now. So they'll schedule an appointment, but by the time the appointment comes, they have canceled them. So we have open positions within the month. Before, where we had, schedule out 2 to 3 months out. Now people can actually call and there's availability within the month because they're having people cancel or not make appointments.
Strictly by appointments only, or can someone just walk in?
Well, right now it's appointment only.
Okay.
But people can walk in the building, and if they have paperwork they need to drop off, we will receive it and we will review it and we will notarize it for them if they need to do that. But we're not doing appointments on the side. We want to be prepared for them when they come, have a conversation with them before they come. And we want to make sure they're within at least a year of retirement, because if not, a lot can change for them and we may give them information that's not useful for them. Right now, we still, to answer that, we're keeping everything virtual right now. And over the past 3 months, we had 433 appointments and 520 visitors to come into the front office. is the emails. The emails kind of go hand in hand with the call volume. If a member can't get us on the phone, they will email us. Sometimes a member will email us while they're waiting to talk to someone, or they're on the phone and don't receive the answer that they would like. This chart shows the number of emails received, the number responded to, and the turnaround times. Again, here you see the filling of the vacancies in ERG with experienced call center staff, which has really helped lower the turnaround time. The more people get information over the phone and get the answers quickly, the less emails they send in. In February, March, and April, it was just taking us too long to respond. We're now averaging responding between 1 to the same day. Currently, turnaround time is less than a day, down from over 6 days in February. In the last 90 days, we have responded to over 16,000 emails. So I'm very proud of the work that member services have done. I don't want to leave out that sometimes we did have assistance from the L&D department, and sometimes we have assistance from other departments, but everyone has chipped in and was able to get those emails down, and right now turnaround times have been a day or less. The next slide. We'll move into now the call center piece of my presentation, which is the call center is the speed of answer slide, the average speed of answer call. This chart shows how long it has been taken on average to get through to our call center. As I stated earlier, we added 11 new cancels in the call center since July, and it's really starting to show how much that's helped. We have really shown a great improvement down to less than 5 minutes in September from over 38 minutes in February. So that is a big jump in regards to the average speed of answer. So we're answering the calls a whole lot faster. Those 11 people really are helping, along with when we have the education retirement group assist on the days this highlight. I'm very proud of all of the staff with that helping in. The next slide. This is the calls offered and abandonment rate, and this is where it's really going to tell a big story about the assistance and answering the calls in a timely manner and responding to emails, because getting the emails responded to won't call back. But this chart shows the number of calls that have been received and the percentage of abandonment. We have major improvements in the numbers of members hanging up before getting down from almost 60% hanging up before they get through to less than 10%. And in September, we had 9%. So that is dramatic. And I'm very excited about that. The average speed of answer and the abandonment rates are the lowest in almost 2 years, from December of 2020. The email and correspondence turnaround times are at the lowest in almost 3 years. We still have a lot of work to do, but I'm very proud of the progress the team has made, and we're still working to get better each and every day. This is my presentation. Is there any questions?
Any questions? I have one. Can you tell the board and audience about some of the physical upgrades we've made in the call center?
Yes. I believe it was March or April, I'm not sure the exact date, but we transformed the call center into giving them larger cubes. We took the seating from 40 to 22, which allows the team to rotate 50% remote. So we have 22 counselors in the call center at any given time, and then the other set of counselors work remote, which has given us a big edge with hiring. So people like the remote, and so we gave them that. So now we have the screens on the wall with the new live system that will also be displaying each day of what's going on, giving updates, like if we had open enrollment, if it was letting us know how many calls is over there, benefit focus, if we had information that came out about the one-time supplement, if it was something we need to get to the counselors quickly, those reader boards will be able to display that, as well as letting everyone know how many calls are holding in the queue. So everyone liked the bigger space. They do share cubes, but make sure everyone clean before they leave there at the end of their 2-week rotation. And so there's a big plus for the call center. We do have more supervisors in the call center now. It started out as being 2. At one time it was 1, because it was just me. There were 2, and then there were 3, and now we have 4. And we have 4 team leads, which gives the team a more personal contact with their leader and development, especially having so many new staff members. You want to make sure that you're giving them what they need and developing them so they can service the members correctly, adequately, and in a timely manner.
Thank you. You've mentioned open enrollment a couple of times. I guess we get thousands of calls of people who are calling your call center when they should be calling Benefit Focus.
What we
So
did,
Benefit Focus is the enrollment agent for the state health plan.
so we did have call volume for that. What we did to try to get in front of that was we put something on our LGERS. So when they first call the call center and we stated, if you're calling in regards to open enrollment, please hang up and dial this number. And we did that because with the new line system, if we would transfer, the port would stay open and it would look like we had a long hold time on our end, even though we would have moved on to another call. So we are redirecting them over to Benefit Focus at the front of the call. So some people still come through and we'll assist them because some people do have questions in regards to if they're eligible based on their retirement status with us. So we do still handle those calls. So, but we try to redirect them early on so they'll have to wait in our queue and they can get to where they need to be.
And the supervisors and the team leads can also take calls.
Yes, they can.
As well as you, because you used to be one of them.
Yes. The team leads have were all from the floor, the call center staff, so they are very qualified to answer the phones, and they do get on the phones and assist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job. Now we're on to our actuarial joy. Patrick, you got the floor.
Good morning. This is Patrick Kinlaw. I am the Director of Policy Planning and Compliance for the retirement systems. And our team works to ensure the financial integrity and the long-term health of the retirement systems. A bit later in the meeting, you will be hearing about one of the very most important control cycles we have for the long-term health of the retirement systems, which is the annual actuarial valuation. So Buck Consultants, which is represented today by Tanya Manning, Mike Gribble, and Beth Wiley. They're here in the room to present the results of their valuations for all the retirement systems as of December 31st, 2021. As we've discussed at previous meetings, before they completed this valuation, Buck needed to go through what is known as an actuarial transition process. The purpose of that is really to try to replicate the work completed last year by the previous consulting firm. And from my perspective as the staff actuary, that process went very smoothly. Both firms collaborated well to make it go smoothly. For the state system, TSERS, and the local system, LGERS, Buck was able to replicate the work very closely so that there were no meaningful changes to the funded percentages or the contribution rates under board policies resulting from the change in actuaries. You will be hearing Buck report today on some changes in the numbers since last year, but that's with respect to TSERS and LGERS, that's almost all from moving from last year to this year, as opposed to moving from one actuarial firm to another. The reports that Buck will be presenting today are meant to be part of the information that the boards consider when you meet again in January 2023 to make recommendations about funding and benefit levels. They are based on a measurement as of December 31st, 2021. And they generally show improvement in the funding conditions of the retirement systems, the improvements that were recognized during calendar year 2021. That is great news. However, the measurements do not yet include the effect of capital markets during 2022, which have been unkind to investment returns everywhere, and our retirement systems are no exception. Through September 30th, the recorded investment return year to date was negative 13.7%. By the time the boards meet in January 2023, you will know more precisely what the investment returns were for 2022. But just for the sake of example, if the return for the full year turns out to be negative 13.7%, that will need to be compared against the board's assumption of earning positive 6.5% return, and the difference between positive 6.5%, negative 13.7% is about 20%. So again, we'll know more precise numbers when January comes around, but in that hypothetical example, it would mean there has been a market value loss of 20% of the system's assets, which adds up to about $25 billion across all the retirement systems, which we would expect to work their way into future actuarial valuations and measurements. So there will be a mixed bag today, improvement through 2021, tempered with what we know has happened so far in 2022. Sorry not to bring all joy this morning, but I had to deliver that.
Can't say it with a straight face.
Looking at the slide, which has page number 17 at the bottom, one of the compliance section's responsibilities is to administer invoices when retirement benefits exceed the contribution-based benefit cap. That's commonly known as the anti-pension spiking law. This shows the cumulative invoice activity since 2015. You can see the retirement systems have issued invoices related to 568 retirements since 2015. That averages about 73 per year. During that time, the retirement systems have notified employers of more than $56.9 million in contribution requirements and collected more than $45.1 million. Finally, I wanted to touch on two items that are included as appendix materials for today's meeting and briefly explain those two items to you. The first one is called 2022 Legislative Memo. This is a summary that our staff prepares every year detailing the legislation enacted by the General Assembly that we believe affects the retirement systems in some way. In 2022, we identified 6 legislative acts. That was the state budget, budget technical corrections, and 4 policy bills. All of those bills were discussed at previous board meetings as they were enacted, but this memo provides the numbers and the details all in one place. Also, at the end of the memo, there is a description of a change in statute that was not made through legislation, but was a correction made by the reviser of statutes, staff member of the General Assembly, to the statutory wording for the disability income plan of North Carolina. And we have included that change at the end of this memo for completeness of the record. The second appendix document is titled State System Minutes from April 28, 2022, with additional detail requested July 28, 2022. As you may recall, at the July board meeting, the state board approved the minutes from the April meeting with direction to staff to update the minutes to include more detail from the board members' comments section of the April meeting. And that detail has been added and is included in this document for the record. Finally, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to ask that Sam Watts be recognized for the final piece of the update from my section.
Of choice. Sam is our legislative liaison. He does an amazing amount of work for us. So, Sam.
So I get to do the award, Joy.
Okay.
One of the things that I think that I want you guys to be cognizant, aware of, and is that there's a national recognition program for retirement systems through our professional association. And we have the highest number of systems getting the both awards for each system for the longest number of years of anyone in the country. So what we've done is through the legislature's funding discipline, along with the board's discipline on the actuarial control process that Patrick referenced, is we have met the gold standard on both the funding side and through the efforts of Rick and Tanya on the administration side, we have stuck to our knitting. Whereas a lot of people, oh my goodness, let's go from one thing to the other. Let's make a dramatic change and see what happens. these guys have systematically made sure that we're covering the bases to contact members, have members get their information and fill out theirs. So, and get what we need to administer their programs. And so not everyone's able to pull that off. And I think, not to forecast an actuarial joy in this, but you see that when you see you get down to the fire and rescue and to the National Guard pension plan valuations, where it's actually resulted in a turnaround. Now that was a, 7 to 10 year process to turn those around. It involved this board, a lot of work by the staff, a lot of work by the General Assembly, and particularly Representative Hurley did a lot for us on the pensions committee. She's coming on this board in January to note on that. But it's just about that discipline and sticking to it. And so we once again get the Public Pension Coordinating Council's awards for administration and funding for the Register of Deeds Supplemental Pension Fund, the Teachers and State Employees Retirement System, the Local Government Employees Retirement System, the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund, the North Carolina Legislative Retirement System, the Consolidated Judicial Retirement System, and the North Carolina National Guard Fund. We're going to present these to you as the chair of the board. And, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Before we adjourn, we'll get a better picture with the board and the folks who made this happen. And I think Sam did a fantastic job of putting the credit where credit was due. So it's a joint effort, and thank you for doing this. And we're very honored to receive these. Before we go on to our next presenter, just want to tell the board that as tired as you might be of hearing me say this, we are in the check delivery business. So everything comes under the umbrella of the check delivery business. And so that's very, very important. I also want to mention, since we just had our operational update, to put a bow on something that Rick said. When the HBR and the customer do everything correctly, we're getting 100% of retirement processed within 60 days. I think that's remarkable. When the HBR and the customer does everything that they need to do. As you can imagine, in my position and my accessibility, that I get a lot of calls. And sometimes I get calls from people who want to break in line. And shocking. And so I just want to say, for the public record, there are 2 instances where people get to break in line in this building. One is killed in the line of duty, whether they're a law enforcement officer or a DOT worker or anyone else. And those that are in hospice. And diligent as people try to be, especially in the hospice situations, they get up right up to the last minute. They've got something. And as I said earlier, we're stuck with the words on paper. So when somebody is in hospice or killed in the line of duty, some of those are instant deaths, and some of those folks are resuscitated for purposes of 24 to 36 hours necessary for organ donation and things like that. Those 2 groups do get to break in line. Those are not very frequent, but when they happen, we try to do everything possible. We had a 46-year employee in the LGERS system who was a city county finance director, who we had to do that for. And it's just, don't like it, but you're glad that we're able to respond that way, not just with our minds, but last thing, and I want to end this whole presentation with a standing ovation and a round of applause for Tanya, Rick, and all Tom and everybody else who's had a part of this, because there's been a lot of names mentioned over the last few minutes of
people who've done this and done that, but they're all at work. They're not sitting in this room. And I just want the message to go out to all the people in this building who keep us in the check delivery business, how much we appreciate it. The last thing is we are still dealing with payroll issues with a couple of vendors, Gaston County, for example, who are are having issues and troubles with their trying to roll out their new system either through Cherry Road or Tyler Technologies. And this continues to be very concerning to us, as you've heard me say in the past, especially when I look back on my childhood, that if we overpay or underpay somebody, it puts them in a financial vortex that they could probably never get out of because of many people living week to week and month to month, especially in this inflationary period. So my point of saying that to you is that we're doing everything that we can on our end to help solve these problems, but we can't solve these problems. We are the recipients of the information that Gaston County sends to us. And I don't know where we are now, but the last time I checked, we were still in May.
Trying to get June in right now. We have our supervisor and a dedicated reporting specialist in contact with these guys multiple times a day, just trying to work down their errors so that they get that report in June.
Thank you. And it's a very laborious process. And our deepest concerns are not just with the people of Gaston County, but this is getting ready to roll out in Guilford County. So we're talking about larger and larger systems where this is getting ready to roll out. And so I just want to tell you that this is not only on our hearts, but on our minds. And as a member of the State Board of Education, as you can imagine, we get briefed on this from time to time, and people come in and say this and say that. And sometimes, forgive me, I have to call BS on it, because I know that when the paperwork is not in this building, when the money's not in this building, whatever some consultant's trying to convince me of, ain't happening. There's still issues. So didn't mean to be inelegant there, but this is a serious issue. Whenever we overpay or underpay anyone, and it could be where we were supposed to take out a family premium for the health plan and we didn't, or we took out a single premium and not a family premium. It's all kinds of variations. People who worked over the summer and may have worked and got funding from several different funding sources over the summer. Piles of money coming in there, and credit for service coming in from different places. It's very, very complicated in this country.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Gaston situation I know is a real problem, but I thought they're also ready to roll out in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. And so it just seems like before any expansion takes place, that somebody has got to work with these folks up front ahead of time before the problem develops and gets spread even further. And I don't know who has authority to do that.
Sure. Let's correct my record that when I say Guilford, does anybody know about Mecklenburg being next?
I don't know what's next. Do you know?
I don't know what's next.
Well,
Yeah, and then Sam and then Sarah. Go ahead, Sam.
well, I think it's
Identify yourself.
with regard to the DPI's business modernization project. I think they've largely put the current version, on hold, and they're seeking to, before they let another major one go online, that they would see if they could avoid what we're seeing right now with the ones that are problematic. That's the last word we had from the Department of Public Instruction on it. I hope that's still the case, because certainly the Gaston County situation has been dreadful for the affected employees, not getting their exact paycheck or getting their retirement credits when they thought they were supposed to get them. It's eventually all going to be trued up and fixed. We're able to assure people of that, but it's a dreadful feeling when they look on orbit and it's wrong. Now, we are aware that New Hanover County didn't go through the implementation, but they've been putting a Band-Aid on it every month for more than 6 months now with their employees. employees. And so they're working their own people working them very hard to make sure that at least the Band-Aids are on. So they're not out of the woods yet either. But Mecklenburg was within a few days of going live and made a decision to hold back.
Okay.
And Guilford has a separate set of issues and problems with what they're considering. But we're just trying to encourage people to be cautious on these major moves.
Sarah?
Sarah Collins with the League of Municipalities, and obviously don't have anything to do with the school systems upgrades, but if there is some best practices in choosing a rural system that we can share with our members, municipalities, we're happy to get that information to them.
I was speaking with Drew Heath a few weeks ago, and they were right on the verge of rolling out their huge system, which would have affected the entire court system, child custody, child support, alimony. One doesn't relate to another, but I'm telling everybody that I possibly can in state government that when you're getting ready to roll out this system, I hope that you're measuring 4 times and cutting once. And OSHR, I think, is on the verge of maybe rolling out a system. And I also will tell you that we have a new controller in North Carolina, Nels Rosalind, who used to be on this board, maybe still. Supplemental board, excuse me. And we have close contact with our banking group as well as the controller's office and as well as OSHR. I will add, and there's no elegant way of saying this, and especially for the stakeholders in this room, and that if you're part of a stakeholder group like NCAE, putting out email blasts, if this happens, that, blame the treasurer's office or blames our staff or says we should have never approved this. We didn't have a damn thing to do with approving the systems. We didn't write the law. We didn't appropriate the money. People in OST have nothing to do with systems. We are just a recipient of the information that's coming from the system. And I think it's disingenuous to make people think that people are responsible for this cluster. We are working as hard as we can to try to correct the problem with the other people who are involved. But it's disingenuous because I'm trying to respond to an email where somebody says, why did you approve this? Why did you do this? Why aren't you doing that? And it's very hard because the last thing I ever want to say, people who know me know this, say, well, I had nothing to do with that. That's not everything. I've never responded to anybody that way. So just when stakeholder groups are putting out information regarding this very serious topic, they need to be absolutely factual about where the responsibility and the accountability lie.
Question, software, whenever we roll out new software, generally speaking, system record, we have make believe sandbox where we test it with all the other places where it needs to interface, HUD, everything else. So as these municipalities and schools are rolling out new software for payment, are they sandbox testing that with Orbit to make sure it feeds properly and stuff before they hit the button and say execute, or are they executing it on the backside?
When the school systems do it, Rick, or Sam, either one.
I will, the most succinct way I can put it is they neglected to consider the existence of the state health plan or the retirement systems.
As an example. As an example. Thanks. All right. Thank you all. And with that, I would like for all of us to join and give these operations folks a standing ovation for all their work. So thank you. And there's that. Get Josh Patrick's seat down so when they're sitting there, they're all the same height. Yes, makes a difference. Okay, we're now to more joy. Excuse me, Greg Patterson, and then we'll go to Senor Rules.
So was it excuse me that I'm not more joy, or? Well, since we're having a theme for our reports, I am going to piggyback on Patrick's comment that I'm going to be providing the unkind Investment Advisory Committee report. Let me first remind everyone that the materials presented to the Investment Advisory Committee, including the performance reports, can be found on the nctreasurer.com. Look under divisions and go to the investment division. We met on August 24th. We began the meeting with discussion, updating the board on the economic environment, the capital markets, what was going on with the plan in the second quarter, touching on interest rates, equity markets, inflation, rate increases, the spread, poor equity performance, and poor bond market performance. So there's your unkindness. The portfolio for the retirement system as of June 30th was at 111 billion. I checked yesterday with one of our co-investment managers and was investment officer, excuse me, and told that the portfolio at the close of the market was at $106 billion. The 12-month return through June 30th was a negative 6.73%. That does compare favorably with our benchmark. The benchmark was down almost 9%. 3-year return, 4.86. Benchmark was 4.89. 5-year return, 5.69 versus 5.37 on the benchmark. And the 10-year return at 6.69 as compared to 6.07 on the benchmark. After the performance review, we had a discussion about a asset class in the portfolio referred to as private equity. By statute, the plan cannot hold more than 8.75% of the portfolio in private equity. As of June 30th, we were under that cap at 8.38%, which was right at about $9 billion. There are 98 active private equity funds. Here's a little joy for this portion of the portfolio. The 1-year return on the private equity asset class is a little over 15%. 3-year return, 23%. 5-year, 19.5%, and 10-year, 14.35%. Also looking at asset classes, and this is just amazing to me, that roughly $60 billion is managed internally within this building. We then looked at the next 19 managers, which account for about $37 billion of our assets. And then finally wrapped up the meeting with a discussion about public equity. The public equity portion of the portfolio, 1-year return, negative 20%, 3-year return, 5.91, 5-year right at 7, and 10-year, 9.19. The folks in the investment division did take on a project where we consolidated 2 of the funds. They now manage 4 passively funds internally. And again, well, my last time I'll use this term, but I have to use it again, remarkable. In managing those 4 funds, they executed over 54 million trades in those funds. And that concludes my report, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for doing that. Next, we'll go to, and while you're on that report, because I also get a lot of emails about our treasurer's office and our response to all the national press regarding ESG. Not have, nor do we implement any ESG strategies inside the plan. We are impacted by ESG policies around the country, and you'll be hearing more about that later. We are fiduciaries. Our only loyalty and duty of care to those that teach, protect, and otherwise serve, and taxpayers like that. And these issues regarding ESG and the impact are very serious. They don't just impact me as the chair of this board and as the state treasurer, but also as the chair of the local government commission. It's been said to me that the rating agencies are very big into the ESG business. these days. In some cases, maybe possibly visiting counties who are having difficulty making their pension payments and asking them how many EV vehicles they have. You know, when you're having trouble making your pension payment and you get asked how many electric vehicles you have, and maybe your rating of your bonds and the interest rates you pay may be determined by that. It becomes a very delicate balance. So I just want to say that for the record regarding our ESG policies in this building. So with that, we'll go to Tim Melton. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I'll be presenting the decennial rules readoption summary and the final rule text for the rules and the impact analysis. This is agenda item 7. My name is Timothy Melton. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for the Retirement Systems Division. And in accordance with the North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 150B, which is the Administrative Procedure Act, agencies are required to review their rules at least every 10 years. So this has been an ongoing project, and we are very close to completing this lengthy review and readoption process. The materials for the agenda item include a decennial rules readoption summary, provides a brief overview of the process and some of the steps that have already been taken by the state and local boards. The materials also present the final rule text of the retirement systems rules under Title 20, Chapter 2 of the North Carolina Administrative Code, as well as the accompanying impact analysis. So these materials should look familiar to most of you, as the same rules and impact analysis was proposed to the boards some 6 months ago at the April 2022 meeting. At that time, I did highlight some of the details of the proposal and acknowledge the hard work and dedication that went into preparing the proposal. So on that date, the boards unanimously voted to approve the proposed rule text and the impact analysis. Now, since that meeting, the proposal was subsequently published in North Carolina Register on June 1st, 2022. That thereby started the 15-day period to request a public hearing, as well as the 60-day public comment period. After that was published in the registry, there were no hearing requests and no comments received during the respective periods. So now the next step of this decennial rules review process calls for the boards to approve and officially adopt the final rules text and the impact analysis. So if the boards approve and adopt them, DST staff will then submit the final rule text to the Rules Review Commission for review at their December 15th, 2022 meeting. Once formally approved by the commission, the rules process will conclude shortly thereafter. So today, staff recommends that the boards approve and adopt the final rule text and regulatory and fiscal impact analysis related to 20 NCAC 02 and authorize DST staff to take the additional steps necessary to complete the decennial rules review process in accordance with NCGS 150B-21.3A. That will conclude my presentation. I'll try to be brief, but I'm happy to take questions regarding this agenda item.
Thank you. In just a moment, I'll ask for a motion. We'll need 2 separate motions from the TSERS and the LGERS board. And then once we get a motion on the table, then we'll open it up for discussion. Do I have a motion from a member of the TSERS board to approve and adopt the final rule text and the impact analysis related to 20 NCAC 02 and to authorize DST staff to take all additional necessary steps necessary to complete the decennial rules review?
So moved. Didn't hear who made the first and the second. Greg Patterson, made the first.
But my wedding vows weren't that complicated.
I think we'd have to restate the motion.
Yeah.
That was all of them.
Sorry, who was that?
I'm sorry, this is Oliver. I missed the motion, so I'm backing out. So your first and second was staying with who you have.
You have your first and second.
I have first as Greg Patterson. I didn't hear the second.
So moved for the second.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Oliver. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer? Aye. Barbara Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you. Dirk German?
Aye.
Thank you. Jeffrey Winstead? Aye. Thank you. Joshua Smith?
Aye.
Thank you. Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Thank you. Linda Gunter?
Aye.
Thank you. Margaret Reeder?
Aye.
Thank you. Oliver Holly?
Aye.
Thank you. And Vernon Gammon? Aye.
Thank you very much. I'd like a motion do I have a like motion from a member of the local board to approve and adopt the final rule text and the impact analysis related to 20 NCAC 02 to authorize DST staff to take all necessary steps required to complete the decennial rules review.
This is Homer Dearman, so moved. Lee Atkinson, second.
Okay, Mr. Brown made the motion, and Homer, if that would be a second, that'd be great. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Treasurer?
Aye.
Brenda Howardson? Did not hear Ms. Howardson. Clea Atkinson?
Aye.
Thank you. Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morse? Did not hear Mr. Morse. Kevin Gordon? Did not hear Mr. Gordon. Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Thank you. Melody Brady?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Vaughn?
Aye.
And Vernon Gammon?
Thank you very much. We're now on to our actuarial overview. And, I think what we'll do is we'll take about a 4-minute break and reconvene at 10:30. So we get into actuarial. Thank you. 5 minutes.
You'll lose all your reports.
It's really up to you.
And so she finally did.
Thank you all. Thank you, those that are joining us by phone. And we're now to the part of our agenda where we welcome Tanya, Michael, Elizabeth, and Buck Global. And welcome to North Carolina. We have the floor for our actuarial overview.
Thank you. My name is Tanya Manning. I'm going to kick things off for Buck. I am the chief actuary for Buck, but I'm actually a resident of North Carolina. I live in Winston-Salem, and I was smart enough.
I thought I seen you at Harris Teeter.
You probably did. That's right. And I was smart enough to beat the traffic to get here this morning, so I was actually early. So I'm going to be here to just kick things off and to also support the account, but the important work and all the detailed work, and you can tell by the allotment space at the table. It's going to go to Mike Ribble, who is from Texas, and we also have Elizabeth Wiley, or Beth Wiley, who's speaking to us from Indiana. Both fellow actuaries, as am I. Just want to make sure to emphasize some of the points that Patrick made, is that we have gone through a very careful transition process to make sure that we are up and running and doing everything accurately as actuaries can do. And we did have a lot of cooperation with the prior actuaries, so we are thankful for them. No meaningful changes. We did find a few things that we wanted to improve in the calculations and some clarity in the reports that you might notice if you go through them quite carefully. But overall, that was a pretty smooth process. What we're going to be presenting today is the December 31st, 2021 valuations. We had to go back to a happier point in time as far as the markets go. As you all know, the actual valuations are different than checking your defined contribution, 401k, or whatever account. Can't do that every day for DB plan. You have to take a lot of efforts and a lot of steps to understand not only the status of the plan today, but a lot of guesses and estimates and such calculations for the future. So that's what we're doing. And we will have a better story for you than we probably will when we start looking at some of the estimations of what the investment returns have meant for 2022 on the plan and start looking at the upcoming board alternatives. You also have to keep in mind that not only we are looking at a December 31st, 2021 valuation, but we've also had 4 of the 5 past years have been favorable on the investment side. And those are all being slowly recognized and phased into the way that we're recognizing the assets when we compare them to the projected liability or the amount that you owe for the benefits. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike now that I've gotten us through the happy times. He's going to talk about what you can expect when you look at 2022. But I will say, so far, this has been the most joyful discussion of actual concepts so far. So good. Mike.
Morning, Mr. Treasurer, trustees. Thanks for having us today. Yes, my name is Mike Rubel. I'm a principal and consulting actuary. Yeah, I'm here to provide some joy and some caution as well. Way to say it. So even after recognizing the 9.7% market returns that we received last year, even a snapshot at 12/31/21. We still, the TSERS state system and the local LGERS both have unfunded liabilities still, 9.2 billion for TSERS and 3.2 billion for LGERS. And that does not yet include, as Tanya mentioned, the effects of the 2022 investment returns. So Patrick had mentioned those were minus 13.7% through September 30th. And if that ends up being the year end, that's a 20% drop. We're trying to get 6.5%, in the long run. This year, not so much. Maybe, it's minus 13%. That's 20% drop, or $25 billion across all systems. So that'll work its way out. There's a 5-year smoothing and 12-year amortization. So these things are meant to work out over long periods of time. We're in it for the long haul, but it will be a different story when we're here next year. The boards will have some options to consider. The benefit improvements and recommendations and decisions for the board are mostly for January of 2023. Today we'll give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come And as Patrick mentioned, when we get to that decision point at the end of 2022, we'll know kind of good estimate or final returns for the year. And, you can consider that. It's advisable to consider the 2022 returns when making decisions. Understanding the boards do not specifically indicate, how the board should account for that information. So as we move through these presentations today, one by one, where there's opportunities to talk about options that may be available to the board, we'll give you a preview. So moving on to the chart above, we have 2 pages on this overview. The first is the 4 state systems, and from left to right, that's the state system, the teachers and state retirement systems, judicial, legislative, National Guard, and then we have a total for some of the numbers. Not shown here because they kind of have it fit in a different mold, are the death benefit plans and the disability income plans. We'll also be addressing those later. One note to make on the total members of TSERS, it's almost 740,000 compared to the total for all the state systems of 758,000. So that's 98% of the members are in this teachers and state employees system. So you also see with the liabilities and the assets, it's well over 98% that as well. So we may spend a little more time thinking about it and reviewing and discussing the state plans, but we are going to hit all the other plans and kind of what you need to know as a board as far as what changed year over year and any options you may have. Switching down to kind of the middle of that section for TSERS, you'll see a couple of ways we measure the health of the system. One is how well is the plan funded, or how much pension debt or unfunded liability we have. And we do that on this actuarial value basis by year smoothing of assets. So we're not riding a wave of unfunded liabilities every year, but it's smooth. And the unfunded liabilities I mentioned was $9.2 billion. That's the difference between what we're targeting to have in the fund, the accrued liabilities, minus the recognized assets or the actuarial value of assets. The second measure we look at is the funded ratio, and that's the amount of assets we have in the fund on an actuarial value divided by the liabilities of the system. And for TSERS at December 31st, 2021, that was 90%. It's up from 86.8% from the prior year, mainly due to asset return gains. On the bottom, as we shift to the bottom half, this is the development of the employer contribution needs of the state for the fiscal year begins July 1st, 2023, ending June 30th, 2024. The top half is dollar amounts, and then we convert those dollar amounts. So when we talk about percents of payroll, we take the dollar amounts and we divide them by a projected percent of payroll for that upcoming fiscal year to arrive at percents of payroll contributions requirements. Based on the board's policies, the bottom line is that the board's policies, ECRIS for stabilization policy, requires that 16.44% of payroll contribution to be recommended to the appropriation for the board's policies. Now that's before any impact of any benefit improvements the board might consider recommending. Last year's rate was 17.38%, but we reduced it 1.29% for non-recurring items, most important the October 22 bonus. And then we added for the state contribution policy of 35 basis points. We've been adding, ticking it up 35 basis points a year. So arriving at that 1644, we also need to do a bunch of actuarial math that I won't get into and determine what is a minimum level in the policy for the actuarial determined contribution. And that is 12.39% of payroll as of 7/1/2023. So last year that amount was 16.42, so quite a drop. Some of that was asset performance. The other interesting thing was 12 years ago, 12/31/2009, when I was here, we actually set the unfunded liabilities at that time, the entire unfunded liabilities as an initial phase and paid it off over a 12-year period. 7/1/2023, that's going away. It'll be paid off. So the rate of contribution needed on an actuarial basis has dropped significantly. Just a quick hits on the judicial. It's increased a little bit to 84%, and LRS actually flipped from a little bit underfunded to a little bit overfunded at 101.9%. And then the National Guard has increased tremendously from 90.6% to 115.7%. And some of that was asset return. A lot of that was a change in the data source and assumptions that we received that were significantly reduced the expected liabilities, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So flipping over to the local systems, next page. So from left to right, we have the local government employees retirement system, or LGERS, and then we have fire and rescue squad workers, registered fees total. And again, those totals for the local system. The membership, fire and rescue has a lot of members, but the assets and liabilities for local are over 98% of the total local plans. Flipping to down to the middle of the chart for LGERS, the funded ratio is 90.7%. Similarly, the good investment return increase from last year's of 87.8%. Looking at the bottom, effective July 1st, 2023, the board's policy for stable contributions, or LGERS, is for general employees and firefighters is 12.85%. That's up 0.75% for the policy. And for the law enforcement officers, it'll be 14.1%, which is up 1% for the policy. The total increases of the 0.75% and the 1% amount to about $60 million for current contribution increase for the next fiscal year for employers. Comparing that bottom line to the actuarial calculations and actuarial determined contributions, you might see ADC or ADEC. Those are the actuarial determined contributions. That is for general employees and firefighters, that's 10.43%, down a little bit from last year, and 12.39% for law enforcement. The main reason for the decrease from last year was strong asset performance. And lastly, the registry is 157% funded. But lastly, the fire and rescue squad workers improved also from 95.8 to 102.4, so it went over that 100% threshold. Mostly due to asset gains, strong contribution policy, a lot of contributions going in. The SCRIS, or state contribution policy, is calls for $20.1 million in funding in the next fiscal year. The comparison, we had a lot of good asset returns, and again, the payoff of the 12-year unfunded drops the ADEC significantly from 13.1 million to 3.3 million. 20.1 million on the state contribution policy. So these results for both National Guard and Fire and Rescue will open up the opportunities. They both flipped over 100%, open up the opportunities to discuss and consider benefit improvements, which we'll get to later. And as a final note, I guess Sam also eloquently, more eloquently probably said than I would, the National Guard and Fire and Rescue are two of the lowest funded systems 5-10 years ago. I think 10 years ago, probably around 70% for National Guard, and now they're both over 100%. We haven't built in 2022 results, so maybe it's short-lived, but it's just a result of the hard work of the General Assembly board, working with the General Assembly, Lawyers Association, RSD, data cleanup efforts, a lot to be excited about when you think about going from 70% to 100, over 100%. That we're going to move on.
Interrupt you and say that we also have David Vanderwise and others from the legislative staff here who have been very involved in making this happen, and obviously the General Assembly, who gets their money from taxpayers. But in addition to that, even before I was the treasurer, John Schmidt and Kevin Gordon were talking to me about this, as well as the National Guard. So, all those folks deserve a round of applause for getting these funds back around. And secondly, just kind of skimmed over a little bit, some of this has to do with scrubbing our member data. And I'm sure you may get into that a little bit deeper, but
obviously it's easier to do that with these smaller plans than it is the LGERS and TSERS, but we are constantly trying to scrub our data to make sure that we're on the plan, are supposed to be on the plan. We also have a refund policy where people who worked for the state 25 years ago, they got 2 years of service. They're never expected to come back, where we can give them an opportunity to cash out of their plan. So we're constantly trying to scrub our data. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
All right, well, now we're going to move on. We're going to go through each individual retirement systems, and that's going to discuss kind of the key results of the evaluations. And then I'm going to walk you through for the state and local systems, the large systems. I'm going to walk you through some projections. And then where appropriate, we're going to talk about the board options. Moving on to the one titled Teachers and State Employees Retirement System. Starting here.
All right, so as we move through, I'll just mention the slide number that we're on, which will be on the lower right-hand side to kind of help us along. We're not going to go through all pages of this, so if anybody was looking forward to that, I am so sorry. We're going to limit our comments a bit today.
That was actually real joy. Finally.
So first, we're going to go to slide 4, which Treasurer Colwell just very nicely teed up for me. We're going to talk about the membership data. So we're going to go to slide 4, 2 more down. There we go. Perfect. All right. So we're just showing on this slide, where we were at last year and where we're at this year. So the middle column are the counts for the current year, and then the rightmost column is where we're at the previous year. So a couple observations that we have with regard to the TSERS data this year is there was a slight decrease in the number of active members from last year's year of 0.8%, but an uptick in both the terminated vested members, who are those members that have terminated employment with TSERS but have a benefit due to them at some point in the future. And then we have an uptick in the retired members and those participants who are actually in receipt of payments from the prior year. And that figure increased 2.1% from the prior year. So you see how the inactive group is growing and somewhat outpacing the active member group. And we do expect that trend to continue into the future. I will say that a lot of these movements were relatively in line with expectations. So we don't see a significant, what we call liability loss. As you'll see here in a couple. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move us to slide 8.
I will interrupt before you do that. I think most people have heard me say we have crossed the precipice, that there are less people paying into this plan than are not. This chart shows that. Thank you.
All right, we'll move to slide 8 now, where we'll discuss the asset information. So slide. Perfect. All right, so this slide shows the past 5 years worth of return information. So the yellow bars are your market value of assets, and then the blue line is your actual return for the year. The pink line is what we anticipated for the year. So 2021 was the first year in this 5-year period where we anticipated a 6.5% return based on the setting of assumptions from the previous year. And we exceeded that return, as you well know. We got a 9.68% return for the year, which caused our results to be $2.1 billion higher than what we were anticipating. Now, we do show 5 years worth of information here for a very specific reason. Asset deviations from expectations are smoothed in over a 5-year period. So rather than recognizing all of the good news right away, we phase it in over time to help us out in years like this one, where we're seeing a very difficult year of investment return, unless a miracle happens in November and December. It could happen, in my mind. All right, and then we'll move on to slide 18.
Greg, is that going to happen?
Treasurer, we have a chance. It's 1 in a million, but we got a chance.
It's an optimist. I'm an optimist, but it's not good for an actuary, probably. All right, so on this slide, we are showing a comparison of your asset return, which is the blue line, versus your actuarial return, which is the yellow line. So you can see how your yellow line is smoothed out and goes in the same trend as your market value, but doesn't hop up and down. Significance of that is that your actuarially determined contribution then, which is what we use the actual value for your funded percentage and the recommended contribution, that's not hopping up and down along with that. And if we look at 2021 on this page, on an actuarial value of assets basis, it looks like you got a 9.18% return rather than the actual 9.68% return. But there are 4 great years that we're recognizing in there. That makes sense. All right. Moving on to slide 20. All right. On this page, we are showing a comparison of your liabilities in yellow to your actuarial value of assets in blue. So you can see that even though we have this wonderful asset here, the plan is still $9.2 million underfunded as of 12/31/2021. And based on the policies set in place by the plan, those are paid off. That unfunded liability is paid off over a 12-year period. The plan is 90% funded as of 12/31/2021, which is a strong funded percentage. All right, and we'll just go right to the next slide, slide 21.
You have any other clients that are 90% funded?
Well, yes, I do. I do have other clients that are 90% funded. I will say North Carolina has a very widespread of very strong funded plans across the board. And your amortization policy too over a 12-year period is relatively short, which is helping keep your funded percentage pretty high.
We're more conservative on our.
Exactly.
Yeah, I attend a lot of public plan conferences, and they often rank the whole states as best they can because there's multiple plans and different assumptions. There's always a little bit of pride because North Carolina is typically at the top of the stack. So to your point, very strong.
Slide 21, it just moves us from last year to this year in terms of your unfunded liability. So last year at the top, you can see the plan was $11.9 billion underfunded as of the end of that year. The first 4 lines really just move you to where we expect you to be as of this year based on your contributions, the benefits that are promised during the year that you're growing at, and then interest on your unfunded liability. So we expected you to be at $11.1 billion of underfunding. Where you ended up was $9.2 billion. The reason that happened, you can see there in the middle of the page, is that $2.1 billion asset gain, which drastically reduced your unfunded liability. Right below that, you can see what I alluded to before, which is your actuarial quote unquote gain loss. I don't know a better way of describing that, is a way of just saying how good we were with our expectations. We were very close to expectations. And I'll also note that our transition information is also included in that figure, and our transition was incredibly close to matching the prior actuary. It was 0.16% of your liabilities. So not a lot of noise was created there at all. All right, we'll move on to slide 23. All right. So this slide shows your recommended contribution on an actuarial basis before applying your ECRIS funding policy. So on the blue line, or excuse me, the blue bars is the portion of your payment that is associated with the pay down of your unfunded liabilities. The yellow is your normal cost, the cost of benefits that your employees are earning in the upcoming year. Those are the 2 key pieces of an actuarially determined contribution for your plan. In general, you'll see that normal costs remain fairly stable as a percent of pay over time just by design of what it is. It's the blue bar that's going to maybe hop up and down based on how well your assets are performing and how your liability is funding. So you can see there's a drastic drop off in your fiscal year end 2023 contribution to your fiscal year end 2024 contribution. So it went from 10.03% in that blue section all the way down to 6.06%. You may be inclined to think that that could be due to asset performance, and that did help.
What mainly drove that, though, was the drop off of the 2009 12-year payment that Mike had alluded to earlier that caused that to dip down substantially. That was $2.4 billion worth of your liability, of your recommended contribution.
Getting your house paid off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the key part of your house has been paid off. All right. And then moving to slide 26. So on slide 26, we are moving from the actuarially determined contribution from last year, this year. Last year, we were at 15.13% before reflecting those one-time supplements. Okay. And then we moved through to 12.39% as of the end of the year. What drove that down, again, was that 1.91% of payroll reduction due to the drop-off of that amortization payment. And we also have a 1.5% reduction just due to the asset performance for the year. So you can see how we moved this year. And this is still just the actuarially determined contribution. All right. I'm actually going to hop back a couple slides. Sorry to
sorry to stop you. So, because I talk about this a lot. So the TSERS employer contribution rate is what?
The TSERS employer contribution rate?
Is the top number or the bottom number?
The bottom number. Bottom number is the actuarially determined contribution before reflecting your ECRIS for the year.
So when I've been saying it's 16% of payroll, I'm inaccurate.
No, you are correct based on the ECRIS. So this is our minimum. Yeah, this is our baseline. Moving into the policy.
I just like to be factual when I'm talking to groups.
Yeah.
Thank
You are being factual.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So if we hop back to slide 24, which maybe in hindsight could come before this one, we basically reconcile to what you're
back to 24.
Yeah, back to 24, exactly. So on this page, we're just showing what your ECRIS is now for 2024, which is 16.44% of payroll. So what your policy is that your recommended contribution that we just showed you is the floor for what your contribution is recommended to be under your ECRIS. But in general, it is set to 0.35% of pay plus the appropriation from the prior year, your recommendation from the prior year. So you can see on this page how we reconcile that figure.
Before you go off that, because we deal with this discount rate on our OPEB liability. By the way, Winston-Salem has the highest OPEB funds in the United States.
I'll write that down.
Like 80% funded. So thank Lawrence Coakley, former finance officer, who sits on the IAC board. All right, so in this OPEB situation, it's kind of perverse because as interest rates go up, our liability goes down. So talk about that in the context of this last bullet point, because obviously this rate's going to be going up to 1.9. Am I thinking?
The 1.9 is a 30-year treasury rate. Interest rates are going up, and as they do. I mean, this is just a maximum in the policy of the 30-year, to look at the 30-year treasury rate and see what that might require as far as an actuarial determined contribution. At 1.9%, it's 92.11% of payroll would be required to fund it at that. As interest rates rise, that rate will go down. I wouldn't expect unless it gets up to the 6.5%. It's good. 30-year treasury gets there, then we've got to compete. We've got to take another look there. That's why we don't usually point that bullet out, because it's not even close, but it could get close.
Okay. And just for the board's purposes, 14 months ago, we were earning 1% on government bonds. Put a few $100 million to work in the last few weeks at almost 6%. So bad the economy for interest rates to go up, but it's giving us some tailwind as far as the pension plan's earnings.
Well, if we can get the 30-year treasury to 6.5%, we just send everybody home, couldn't we?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what the world would look like if treasurers got sick.
So now moving to slide 27. We're going to talk about a preview of the potential cost of living adjustments effective over the next 2 fiscal years. So we kind of, valuation results were positive this year with a good return, and they do indicate that we have actuarial investment gains in line with the cost of a COLA to be effective this upcoming first fiscal year, July 1st, 2023. It would require an increase in the employer contributions to cover the cost. We're going to come back to that. This slide, bottom line, is an analysis that we provide that projects potential for July 1st, 2024. And so it's kind of backwards, but just hang in there. In July 1st, 2024, it's probably not likely. Right now, we said minus 13.7%. Beth is hopeful for a huge recovery. We would have to get to about minus 1% at the end of the year for it even to be possible to afford $1 of COLA or supplement. To afford $1 of a whole 1% COLA, we'd have to get to a market recovery of plus 2% for the year. So that's what I have to say about July 21, 2024. It's just, the expectation should be low for that under the board's policy.
So since you have to make money to get back to even, you're talking about a 20 to 24% rally from here.
So flipping to slide 28, let's go back and talk about July 1, 2023, or the upcoming fiscal year. And the considerations are, what is the authority? The TSERS board can recommend COLAs to the General Assembly. The board does not have the authority to grant COLAs. We'll talk about maximum amounts that the board has the authority to recommend on the next page. The type of increases to consider, I'm sure you're familiar with, would be a one-time supplement, similar to what we paid in October this month, October 22. You could do a one-time supplement in October 23, or a permanent lasting COLA effective July 1st, 2023, would increase the monthly benefit for current benefit recipients, retirees, and beneficiaries. It would be permanent increase. So those are the two types, supplement or permanent. The funding that we would recommend, if you had an immediate funding for a supplement or a bonus, as we called it earlier, we think we should pay that off over 1 year. If you put a longer term COLA in, we recommend, might want to consider 12-year funding of that. So, and another reminder is this, whatever is recommended has to, if you start with the 6.44, and then it's plus onto that. If you recommend a COLA or a supplement, you have to add on to the 6.44. So flip into this next slide. So this is a table of the cost of permanent COLAs at the top. The actuarial investment gains that we've stored up over 4 of the last 5 good years is $2 billion and $62 million, $2.1 billion. The cost of a 1% permanent COLA is $533 million. We would be limited to 4% or CPI, or not 4%, but CPI if it was higher. But it's not likely given the current inflation. Sorry if it was lower, I said that wrong. If the CPI was lower than 4%, it could be limited. But right now it's limited by 3.86% because the cost of a 1% is $533 million. The cost of a 3.86% permanent COLA is $2.1 billion. It's almost exactly. So if you were to recommend a 3.86% all-in COLA, you would spend all this entire $2.1 billion investment gains that we've earned over the past 5 years. The bottom box below just notes the cost of a 1% supplement is $51.2 million, or 0.3% of pay. The max is there would be 4% because you can, because it would only cost but $204.8 million, or 1.2% of payroll. Moving on to the next slide. While the board could recommend all max 3.86% COLA, the board may consider some reasons why, perhaps recommend an amount less than the maximum, or less than the maximum COLA or another supplement or bonus. For an investment sharing, gain sharing type plan like this, the board may want to consider a more limited benefit. Each valuation will be here generating an actuarial gain or loss. Well, we didn't generate it, but we'll be reporting it. And, as we expect next year will be a loss. And so, as I mentioned, if you spend, every time you get a gain, you spend it all on COLAs, then you get a loss. Then now what do you do? Because you're just putting downward pressure on the system. The latest asset liability study that the DST commissioned showed less than a 50% chance of achieving 6.5% over not just 10 years, but even over a 30-year period. So current gain that we have might be used to offset future losses like we anticipate next year. So that might be another reason to consider less than the maximum. I mentioned there's unfunded liabilities of the system of 9.2 billion. Paid investment returns minus 13.7%. And just again, keep in mind the board's ECRS qualities, the cost of COLAs are added to the funding that you would have to ask for appropriation of. Any questions on that? I know that's a lot of information. And there's a lot of decisions to be made January, and we'll have more precise numbers.
Any questions? We'll start with our members. Make sure you don't feel that you're being left out. Any questions from the remote members about what you've heard so far?
Hey, this is Dirk German. I'm on my phone.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I don't know if I apologize if you've already addressed this, but the unrecognized asset gain, can you explain that a little bit to me?
Sure. The 2.1 billion gain. Yeah, that is the amount. We've had gains for the past year, 5 years, and the gains have accumulated. We had 2018 was a loss. We recognize that over a 5-year period. So it's partly due to the 9.7%, but we had 11 something the year before. It's an accumulation of the dollar amount over, if we assume 6.5% comes in every year and we get investment dollars above that, it's just the accumulation of what's been recognized through that process that we have.
So
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did I get that for you? Yeah.
Other questions from the phone?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
John? On the previous slide, I believe, when we're talking about the ECRS at the 3.8, I think it took us up to about 17 point something percent. Far right hand side. Sorry, 2% takes us to 17.28. Is that just for fiscal year 2024, or how does that carry forward to 25 and 26?
Yeah, it's 12. We're spreading it over 12 years. Thanks for asking. Yes. So at 0.82% generally.
Every year
for 12 years. This is 12-year funding. As we would.
So if I looked at what we would be costing the current payroll employers, I'm really looking at the 0.41, 0.82, and the 1.56 is what will affect the next 12 years worth of costs. Okay, thank you. That clears it up.
The supplement cost at the bottom is 1-year payment.
Other questions? Okay.
Next. Moving forward to 33, well, 34, let's 34. 33 is a bunch of numbers about how we got to these projections and assumptions. This is a projection. I think we've seen these projections before. It's a projection of the future projected contribution rates with some sensitivity around what the asset return will be in 2022. And we kind of generated these, before we had an 11. And typically we'll come in with what would it be if it was 0 or 6.5 or plus 13. But we did adjust these this year. The bottom, the top line across there, the dark blue line that just goes for 4 years, that is your ECRIS board stabilization contribution policy. So that is the rate, the 1644, and increases 35 basis points. It ends in 4 years because that's when the policy expires and the board would want to reconsider or extend or amend. But the three lines at the bottom, building up from the bottom, the yellow line is assuming, let's assume things go as assumed in 2022 and we had earned 6.5%. The second line is what is the contributions if we had earned 0%? And then we added a third line this year that showed what if it was minus 6.5%, the blue line. So if you imagine the jump from the red line of 0% to the blue line of negative 6.5%, and then you stacked another line on top of it that was, that much higher, you would see a line that peaked at a lot higher rate because of the minus 13%, if that holds for the rest of the year. So it actually would peak at fiscal year 29, just like the one that peaks at 16.19%, that would be about 21.6% where it would peak. So when you think about that board stabilization line and think, well, why are we funding a line that is so much above all these projections? And then if you add that peak for this year, that's going to cut right through the middle of a 21.62%. And hopefully we'll get returns and everything will smooth out over time. But that just wanted to add that context because, we had some returns that came in after we sent these reports that are, significantly less even than minus 6.5%.
Questions about that?
Okay, next slide. Similarly, this is a projected, there we go, projected funded ratio of the plan. So how are we doing? Our goal is to get 12-year amortization to get to 100% funded. Gains and losses take their, so this is a 15-year projection. Asset gains and losses take 5 years to get through. That's like you see some of the dips. But similarly, this is kind of flipped up. The 6.5% return, of course, gives you a better funded ratio if we had achieved that this year. We achieved 0%, the red line a little lower, and then at minus 6.5% is the blue line, which bottoms out at about, well, it starts at 90.6, kind of tails down to 91.4%. Now, again, if you stack it below between the red line and the blue line, take the difference and then drop it down about that much, you're going to see a similar line reflecting minus 13.7% for 2022. Keep in mind that we're assuming 6.5% after that for every year, reflecting that minus 13.7%. It's going to bottom out at about 83.6% at fiscal year 20, or these are calendar year basis at our valuation at December 31st, 2026. So similar to the 91% kind of bottoming out, it's going to drop down to 84%. If the negative 13.7%. We're going to update these based on final return when we come back here in January. So that's what it might look like. And another point to make, in 2036, we actually do, based on the policies, 12-year amortization. A lot of states wouldn't be able to say this, but by the end of the 15-year projection, we're going to be back up to 99% if we keep doing what we're doing. We just have to ride the wave. Next, let's see, we're going to 39, I think that's the next. Just that, I think we've hit a lot of these points, just some key takeaways for the state system. 9.68% return we've taken into account. Another thing we're continuing to do is direct rate smoothing of when we change the interest rate from the assumed interest rate from 7% down to 6.5%, and all the other assumptions that we did with the last experience study. That was smoothed over a 5-year period, and we continue to do that. And then that 12-year amortization payment, $319 million a year for 12 years. And, on our actuarial determined contribution basis, that payment isn't due effective July 1st, 2023. And then our evaluation includes the 4% supplement that was paid in October. On the next slide, just quick comparisons to prior projections back last January. Higher funded ratio based on the results, just a little bit higher due to we didn't have much transition issue at all. So 90% when compared to 89.7% for the baseline, based on it performed by the prior actuary. And we ended up with a lower actuarial determined contribution prior to reflecting the increase. It's 12.39% compared to 14.14% for the prior year. And the next slide, just to wrap up, I'm not going to go through all these, just to say well done. You know, we hit all the points. You got the 12-year funding, conservative assumptions, ad hoc policies of giving benefit improvements. All those things just continue to help the sustainability of the state.
Yeah.
And win awards at this point. Any other questions, comments? Tommy, anything?
On the agenda, we have a vote. I don't know if you want to find them all together at the end.
Sure. Secretary will let me do that. Okay. All right.
Then we'll move on to the judicial system.
So I'm going to be taking us through the judicial system results. It's just be me speaking on this one today. So if you could flip on over to that presentation, should be next on the agenda. And I'm going to hop right on over to slide 4 for the judicial system. No, that's the, we're still in the teachers. I think you have to go to the next agenda item. So moving on to slide 4, I'm just going to explain how we got from last year to this year. It's a similar story to TSERS, where last year at 12/31/2020, the plan was $134.6 million underfunded. We expected to get to $122.1 million of unfunded liability right here. And we ended up though at $129.4 million of unfunded liability. So we actually show that we have a higher unfunded liability than what we were expecting. There is a key reason for this. So you do see the significant asset gain from the strong asset performance for the year, where this plan experienced a 9.67% return. So that did reduce the unfunded liability by $17.4 million. But you can see we have a $22.3 million increase in your unfunded liability due to the actuarial gain loss. Now, what's included in this particular item isn't just your demographic movement. There's a couple other items in here that we do want to highlight. The demographic movement wasn't as significant as what we would describe as a programming modification. So in our match and ultimately quote unquote review, when performing the match to the prior actuary's results, we did see that there was an area where we could better reflect plan provisions for this plan. And that improvement essentially did increase the unfunded liability by $15 million for this plan. It is an accurate representation of how this particular benefit is reflected, but it did ultimately increase your unfunded liability. So it weighed down that positive experience from the asset gain loss. So we started out the year at 84.4% funded, at the end 83.1% unfunded liability of $129.4 million. All right, moving on to slide 5, just the next slide. This shows the reconciliation in the actuarially determined contribution for fiscal year ending 24. The bottom line is what your recommended contribution is for the year. It is 32.84%. Last year it was 37%, 37.01% before reflecting the supplement. You can see that there was a significant decrease in your recommended contribution. largely due to, similarly to TSERS, the drop off of an amortization payment that represented 6.6% of the payroll. So that was the anticipated change that we saw. There was a further reduction due to the investment gain of 2.6% of payroll, and then that demographic loss bumped you back up 4.5% of payroll. Are there any questions about what I just described? So I'm actually going to go ahead and move us on over to the legislators' retirement system, which should be the next agenda item. So if we go over to slide 4. So last year, this plan was underfunded by $0.6 million. You ended the year overfunded at $0.6 million of overfunding. Excuse me. A couple things drove that. The main reason was that asset gain. I will say and the continued contributions into this plan, frankly. So it was that asset gain, though, that really pushed you over the edge to be over 100% funded at the end of the year, 101.9% funded to be precise. All right, on slide 5, this shows what your recommended contribution is at the end of the year. So for fiscal year ending 2024, the recommended contribution is 18.61% of payroll. So that's obviously lower than last year's, which was 22% of payroll, but reflecting the one-time supplement. And again, we see that there is a decrease in your recommended contribution of 3.2% due to the asset performance for the year. Does anybody have any questions on this one? Perfect.
Moving on to the disability income plan. Slide 3 is the next agenda item. Slide 3. This plan's measured a little differently, but just as a measurement, it still has the same actuarial value smoothing. At the top, on the left column, it's 321.7 million on an actuarial value basis. We compare that to the liability for current disabled members of 235.7 million. And look at the surplus for current assets at hand versus the liabilities for current disabled members. The surplus grew from 72.7 million to 85.9 million. And the main reason was that Social Security benefits increased 5.9% this year, higher next year. Effective December 21, though, it was a 5.9% increase. And those are an offset to these disability benefits. The actuarial determined contribution rates, or the rate for the appropriation, increased from 0.1% to 0.11% of payroll, mostly due to transition change. We more transparently as members go straight from short-term disability to long-term disability, rather than assuming they stop at extended disability, because extended disability is typically a healthy subset of members. A short-term disability that would so we work with retirement systems division staff to make sure that that was an appropriate change to make that we would recommend. Questions on that?
Patrick, refresh my memory. Is it, obviously it's not this plan. Which plan is it that's upside down? Is it the death plan?
Yes, Trevor Falwell. I think you're referring to the contributory.
Are you covering that?
That would be last. We were going to save the fun stuff for the.
Sorry. You save the what?
Fun stuff for the very, well, sorry, that's probably not. Yes, it's upside down. You're correct.
This, as long as our census, our current disabled members do not increase with the 8.7% increase this year in Social Security benefits, we expect our surplus to increase.
To grow, yeah.
next to the.
National Guard, yep.
Okay. So we'll move next to the National Guard system. And we're going to, this time, show you some membership data again. I know you missed it on the past few slides, so we thought we'd bring it back to the National Guard. So for this plan, we did see some significant demographic movement for a very specific reason. So on slide 2, just so we can have it up in front of us. So on this slide, the active members stayed relatively stable, but you can see in the middle line, there was a significant decrease in the number of terminated members who are entitled to benefits at a certain point in the future, but are not yet in receipt of payments. So that was a 32.6% decrease in the number of terminated members that were. The reason that there was this change was that there was a change in how this information was reported to the Retirement Systems Division. It is an improved source of information, but it did have some information that was either lacking or surprising that caused us to have to make certain data assumptions. We had to basically remove a significant number of deferred vested members as they were reported with less than 15 years of service and were not considered to be vested. And then there were a certain chunk of folks that actually appeared in the data as vested that were not in there.
Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of what that looked like? Is it where it was Dale Falwell and then Dale R. Falwell, it was dupe, or?
But I don't think we have that level of detail, but it was a better source of data, but it was a limited source of data. So we could look at like their reported service. We're looking at 2 things: how long we were with North Carolina National Guard, and what's their total service that they may have had service in other systems, and whether there was 15 or 20 years of service. And from that, if they were not actively with the National Guard, they're inactive and they haven't met the requirements, just like 2,400 of those members, we assumed that they would not ever be entitled to a future benefit. Now, on the reverse, there were some people that weren't in last year's evaluation and they did meet those service requirements according to the new better data source, and we assumed that those 600 would. So net, we're dropping off about 1,500, 1,600 members from the rolls.
Thank you, John.
I think in talking with Sergeant Major Pratt over at the National Guard, writing the report, some of this was in the past. They ran the report on members who achieved 15 years of North Carolina National Guard service, but may have transferred to South Carolina, Tennessee, or the Army Reserve. So they might get their 20 and retire, but I believe our statute says they can retire from the North Carolina.
Sure.
So in the past, they were tracking everybody who achieved 15 years in North Carolina. Sergeant Major Pratt went in and put the filter in on the new system to reflect only people in North Carolina or who retired from the North Carolina National Guard.
So you and the general and our actuaries are 100% convinced that there's not anybody in this that is entitled to something that's not going to get it. There's not.
We're never 100%.
Yeah,
convinced.
yeah. I'm about to say,
We're-
it's actually gonna be 100.
Our evaluations are based on the data reported. We're not
this contract?
Yeah.
I would have to ask the administrators of the plan,
I just don't want to leave anybody with the impression that somebody's not in the system. If one of these come back to us and provide us new information or a better way of looking at old information, they're back in the queue, right?
our taking them in or out of the system has no bearing on what it will actually be paid or not.
Right. Okay.
And based on the communications with Sergeant Major Pratt running the reports, if people come from Tennessee back to North Carolina because they went and served 5 years there for promotion or Army Reserve, and they come back, they go back into the system and populate the report.
Okay.
So the Guard doesn't ever remove anybody off the report,
Right.
unless they get information from RSD that somebody is deceased, which they do regularly.
Okay. Fair enough. Just anticipating what question I'm going to get. Thanks. If you work on that.
All right, so on slide 5, so on slide 5, just to keep speaking to this, the plan was $16.2 million unfunded last year. is now overfunded by $23.4 million. So that is a significant swing. And as was mentioned before, this plan not that long ago, 5 to 10 years ago, was around 70% funded, and now you have a significant surplus, more of a surplus this year than you had an unfunded liability last year. Part of that is that asset gain. Part of that is due to the liability gain that we experienced. We had more drop-offs than additions in that deferred vested group. So that was called the $25.9 million decrease in your unfunded liability. We do have certain assumptions that we had to make based on the availability of the information provided to us. So we can't say that isn't ever going to swing back to a certain degree, but we did work to make sure that the assumptions that were made were reasonable. And as was previously mentioned, the source of the data that we now have is much improved. So did want to make it clear though what was happening there.
Yes, since we're on it, I guess this is the right spot. In your assumptions and looking at both the risk side, I know on the long report under risk, we didn't talk about unpaid benefits as a liability. So here we're showing we're 23.4 million ahead, but of that 3,222 that are in the transition, not collecting, but they have retired. Of those, I calculated just over 1,300 that were over 60 years old and should be getting a benefit now. I think you projected that benefit at 2-point-something million. But if we paid them all their back benefits, not accounting for any state law that governs interest rates or some changes as the benefits have increased, we'd be up to 26 million in back benefits. Is that, when you look at your the unfunded liability or the funded percentage, is that accounted for in your assumptions for that funded percentage, or is that not accounted for?
What's accounted for is that we assume immediate commencement. We assume that anyone that's over 60 that's waiting to start their benefit would start immediately. But if they're 64 right now and they post back payments, that is not, those back payments.
Not accounted for, in theory, up to 20 some odd million back payments.
Right.
When we look at our funding status. Okay, thank you.
On slide 6, I'll just touch on this briefly. We're showing the recommended contribution for this plan, and I have some good news. Last year, the recommended contribution was $6.9 million. This year, it is 0, and that is due to those demographic gains of $3.3 million that reduced that obligation, and then about $500,000 from investment gain. And a significant portion of the drop off is due to the anticipated reduction that we have in the unfunded liability. There was a $5.5 million payment that began 12 years ago that had fallen off as of 12/31. There we go. 6/30/2023. So that's been paid off. So you already see a significant reduction, and then all the other reductions from there lead to a $0 recommendation.
So is it exactly 0, or it would have been negative?
So it would have been negative, but it set it a
They want some money back. So is anything, given what we now know we're probably going to be experiencing this year, is it would be anything to prevent the General Assembly from funding it, even if the bill said 0?
No, nothing would prevent them from doing that. There's still some caution ahead, not just investment performance, but also, we do have better data, we think, but there's still some assumptions in the data that we don't have in the other systems just due to the lack of available data.
Thank you.
I'd like to hit on the caution note is of those roughly 1,300 people that, again, that list could have people that have deceased, et cetera, on it. We don't know how many. But of that, if we get that list back, we being the board and Buck, get that list back to the North Carolina National Guard. In other words, for example, they can see that there are 19 people who are 93 years old that should be collecting a pension for the last 33 years. There are 16 that are showing as collecting the pension. There are 3 that are not. The National Guard has no way of identifying. They can't see who's getting the pension pension or not. So they have no way to know who those 3 people are and reach out. So in getting that list back to the Guard, the first year, probably forever, thanks to Buck, and pointing that stuff out, they can start tracking down through the defense finance system, because those people are getting a federal pension. They can start tracking those people down and enrolling them. Of course, that back liability could cost us $26 million. So asking the General Assembly for 0 may not be the right answer, but look at a figure in there if we recalculate based on those tables. Thank you.
Okay, keeping with the National Guard, we have some policy options to discuss. We have a summary in the presentation on slide 8 of the state contribution, state contribution rate stabilization clause, TSERS, board adopted in 2021. And as mentioned, the appropriation recommendation based on greater than 100% funded is 0. We're on slide 8. This is prior to the board consideration of benefit improvements. What are the board considerations? The benefit improvement can be no greater than the June over June CPI increase. And there's a benefit improvement funding requirement, which is a new acronym, and for me, BIFR, I think we call it, requires that you should, if you recommend an improvement, that we should do these calculations under this policy to determine what should be recommended to the board necessary to pay for those. So on slide 9 is a table of our BIFR benefit increase funding requirement calculations. The June over June CPI increase is CPIU is 9.06%. So based on that, consequently, the maximum benefit improvement the board could recommend is an increase in the $105. There's $105 per service, and then $210. The cost $105 benefit could increase to $114 and $228, applicable to current and future retired participants. So call that a $9 benefit improvement. Provided though that we look at these calculations under the requirement, see if an additional appropriation is recommended. Here, based on $1 benefit improvement, we have to, since it goes to current active members, we have to look at the current accrued service that they would be getting, their normal costs, and then their accrued liability for actives, and then the liability for the retirees as well and inactives. So increasing it $1 would increase the full actual cost would be $1.4 million to give a $1 improvement, but the policy allows for the offset of the $23 million overfunding. So actually up to we look at $1, $5, and $9 maximum benefit improvement, the benefit increase requirement would be 0. So here's the policy would allow for up to $9 benefit improvement with no additional appropriation recommendation. Questions? Okay, on to local.
So the local side is going to be somewhat similar in structure to TSERS, how we're going to walk through this. So on slide 4, we're just showing the membership data. It is the second largest system in the retirement systems division. So we're just showing a summary of how the population moved from last year to this year. So for active members, there was a very slight 0.1% decrease in the active population, but 2.3% increase in your retiree population. So it's still stable, but similarly to TSERS, we're seeing one outpace the other. And then I'll go ahead and move you on over to slide 8. So sorry to keep flipping you around. So slide 8 looks very similar to what we had shown for TSERS as well, where the legislative system, the LGERS system, had a 9.7% return rather than the 6.5% return expected. So That's a $0.1 billion gain on your market value, and based on smoothing causes your actuarial value of assets to be $770 million higher than what we were expecting. Again, we have that same pattern of 4 years of great return still being smoothed in. So if we hop on over to slide 20, that'll show you the funded status essentially of the plan. So if we look at on slide 2021, the plan had gone from 87.8% funded to 90.7% funded in 12/31/2021. Thank you. So that means that there's still a $3.2 billion shortfall as of 12/31/2021, again, paid off over a 12-year period. So even though we had this amazing asset gain and an improvement in the funded status, there's still a shortfall that needs to be paid off over the forthcoming years. The next slide, slide 21. Last year, the unfunded liability was $4.1 billion. We expected it to be about $4 billion just based on the expected movement throughout the year. The asset gain did decrease that unfunded liability by $0.8 billion. And you can see in the gain loss item, it was only a $6 million gain. Our transition match was really strong on this plan in particular, which given the size of it was, I looked at it a few different times. It was quite impressive how close we got. And there was very little demographic movement outside of our expectations as well. So we really saw very little noise there at all. So at the end of the year, we are at $3.2 billion of unfunded liabilities.
Doug should get applause for that.
I know. Well, we got to applaud the team. They did amazing. So for slide 23, we're just showing the actuarially determined rates for the two subgroups of LGERS, which are the general and firefighters group, and then the law enforcement officers group. So again, this is not the ECRIS rate. This is our actuarially determined rate. That's going to come here in a couple of slides. But you can see that last year for general employees, the recommended contribution before the ECRIS was 11.7% and is now down to 10.43%. Similarly, for law enforcement officers, it was up at 13.44% and dipped down to 12.39%. That is going to be due to primarily the asset gain for the year. This plan did not have that giant 12-year drop off like the other ones did. So if we move to slide 29, it shows you the reconciliation from last year to this year for the actuarially determined contribution. And it's at the bottom of that slide 29. So at the bottom of slide 29 for general employees, it's at 10.4%. For law enforcement officers, 12.39. The investment gain for the year caused a 11.31% decrease as percent of payroll in the recommended contributions for both these plans. But everything else really did not cause a significant amount of noise. If you hop up 4 more slides back to 25, this slide, I know I'm making it super complicated. This slide actually describes what the ECRIS is for this plan, for each of these plans. So for the general employees, the ECRIS for 2024 is 12.85%. And for the law enforcement officers, it is 14%. So as a reminder, the ECRIS was actually set at 11.35% beginning in 2022, and then 0.75% of payroll is tacked on in 2023 and 2024, which is how we get to the 12.85% for 2024. There are adjustments though, if that recommended contribution exceeds that rate I just described by more than 1%. That did not occur this year. Similarly, for law enforcement officers, it's actually just in relation to the general group. For 2023, the ECRIS was just the recommended contribution, the ECRIS for the general employees plus 1%, and then for 2024, it's plus 1.25%. So that's how we get to 14.1% for that group for 2024. All right, and I'm going to now kick it on over to Mike.
On slide 30, this is another preview of the potential cost of living adjustments for the next fiscal years. Valuation results like TSERS, investment gains allow for the board to consider permanent COLAs or one-time supplements effective July 1, 2023, or one-time supplement in October 2023. The ECRIS policy does require an increase in the employer contribution rate to cover the cost. And just the brief, this slide is focused on the July 2024. I already told you it's not likely. You're gonna have a big recovery to -1% for the year as opposed to -13.7, just to even consider it. So on slide 31, this is similar to the prior slide. We're still focusing on 2024, so it's not likely it's all. But we will bring this to the board each year, just kind of monitor as we get close to the year end, whether not just because the board has the authority to grant COLAs or supplements on the local side. We want to look at both. And so we'd have to have significant gains to pay for a COLA or a one-time supplement or bonus. So this is just repeating the information, saying you need a little less asset movement to afford a supplement or a bonus because it's less expensive. On to slide 32. So focusing on July 1, 2023, as I mentioned, the LGERS board has the authority to act based on the results of this 2021 valuation results, but it's limited in the statute. They can either grant a COLA, a permanent COLA, or they can grant a supplement or a bonus, but not both. Inflation limitation likely won't apply because inflation high, but the COLA or supplement cannot be greater than 4%. And it's also limited by the actuarial investment gains we have. I talked about for TSERS, one-time supplement, permanent, recommend one-time supplements are immediate funding, so that's how we've analyzed it, or it's a permanent COLA, then we recommend 12 years. And again, it's added, so it's the 12.85% is the ECRIS rate for general employees, and anything that the board approves as far as a COLA or a one-time supplement will be added to that. On the next slide is the table of potential options based on the investment gains accumulated 4 of 5 past years, be 770 million that we're recognizing this year. Maximum COLA, as I mentioned, is 4%. Increase in the state contribution policy rate, if granted a full 4%, go that 12.85 for general employees would increase 1.28% to 14.13%. Each 1% COLA is cost 0.32% in that last, as we discussed, for 12 years. The next slide is the table of potential one-time supplements that would be payable. Similarly, we had a payment go out 2% for the local members in this October. Supplement could be granted next October. And the max is 4%, which is nowhere near the $770 million cap that has been. A 1% COLA costs $17.9 million or 0.23% of payroll. A 4% supplement or bonus would be $71.7 million. It would increase that 12.85% by 0.92% to 13.7%, similar to group law enforcement. And that would just be a 1-year increase, temporary. On the next slide, I won't spend a lot of time on this, just a reminder that what you can grant a 4% permanent COLA and go all in, or there's all those considerations we talked to for TSERS. The losses we're going to incur during 2022. The fact that the 6.5% discount rate is a 50-50 shot or even less, really, according to the study. And so we may need those gains for possible losses. There's a lot of still downward pressure on investment return assumption and significant unfunded liabilities of the system. Pause for a moment before we go to the projections. Questions? Moving on to slide 39. It's going to be the same pretty colored graphs of projected contribution rates. We have one for the general employees and firefighters on 39. And similarly, we looked at what happens in we built on it. What happens in 2022, a 6.5, 0, a minus 6.5. And there you can see it peaks out at fiscal year ended 2029 at 15.65% for the actuarial determined contribution. And if we were to look at minus 13.7 and say that stays the return for the end of the year, it actually peaks out at 20%. So quite a jump. So it raises the bar even higher from the blue to the yellow, and then even that much higher. On the policy, Beth mentioned that the policy is actually you can move it up or down based on our actual determined contribution. It's not, and we would actually the bar there, the dark blue bar there, is likely to increase from the 12.58 next year. If we get minus 13.7% at the end of the year, fiscal year ending 25 contribution for the policy would actually increase from 12.58 that we showed there to 12.98. So that one does move up and down a little bit based on the results. On the next slide, we've added just the same picture, same assumptions, everything for the law enforcement officers. And that one actually peaks out at 22% in 2029 if the minus 13.7 persists. Last of 41. And flipping it upside down on the funded ratio, everything would have been rosy. We would have been up the blue bar. The yellow bar was minus 6.5%. So if you can imagine dropping it down even lower down, it would bottom out at 12/31/2026 instead of 89%, around 82%. That's how that 5-year, why it bottoms out 5 years, just for both plans. It's the 5-year smoothing of the assets. That's how long it takes to get that loss in fully recognized. I think I'm going to stop there and say, my prepared remarks. Are there any questions?
You got through the death.
Oh, we still got it. I don't get to stop that much.
Got it. 3 more, but they're small.
Okay.
3 more quick ones.
3 more quick ones.
If I can find them.
All right.
What do we got?
Fire rescue.
Hurry up, Pat Hurley's going to withdraw from being on this board in January.
I know.
Registers the deeds.
All right.
Oh, she's very interested in this.
For fire and rescue. All right.
The registered deeds or a clerk?
Oh, it's a deputy clerk.
All right.
All right. So for fire rescue, I'll just go ahead and skip to slide 4 and just make a couple comments on the membership rather than showing it. The only comments I'll make with regard to the membership is we actually saw a decline in the retirees of about 1.2% from the previous valuation date. So we actually saw a little bit of a gain on our liabilities from that decrease, or just more deaths than we had anticipated. And the other is we didn't have as many lapsed members as we were anticipating. So there was a little bit more demographic movement on here, which is driving that $8.5 million gain here on slide 4, our unfunded liability. We started out at $21 million of unfunded, and now we're at a surplus of $12 million of overfunding. Again, that's driven by that asset gain that liability gain, that I just mentioned, and then the asset performance of $12.6 million. So there is a slight programming modification in there as well as a result of the transition, which is just a cleanup lapse assumption in particular. On slide 5, this shows the reconciliation of the employer contribution. Last year, it was $13.1 million. It's now down at $3.3 million. That decrease was helped by the demographic gain that I just mentioned, a reduction of 1.2 million, and then again a drop off of a base established in 2010. So that's $6.8 million is now no longer a part of your recommended contribution. That mortgage payment has been paid off, essentially. And then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike to discuss the stabilization
Right, on
policy.
slide 6, the summary of the board's contribution rate stabilization policy that adopted in April of 2021. Beth mentioned that the actuarial contribution is 3.3 million, but the minimum contribution for the fiscal year, for the upcoming fiscal year, is actually going to be 20.1 million, 20,052,208 to be exact, based on last year's recommendation of 197,02,208 plus $350,000. So $20 million is still in the policy, despite the significant drop to 3.3 million on our actuarial contribution. The board has some considerations for benefit and member contribution increases. Again, it can't be larger than 9.06%. There has to be sufficient funding available for benefit improvement funding requirement calculation. And there's also a goal to keep the funding split 50-50 between the member and state contribution. So the board will recommend the monthly contributions be set at $5 increments to 50-50 share if we should move to benefit improvements. So on slide 7 is the benefit improvement. The current benefit is $170 a month. The maximum increase is 9.06%. So the maximum improvement is $15 a month, payable to current and future retirees. So we do the same thing where we calculate the cost of a $1 increase is 2.9 billion, but then we account for some surplus and then we have the underlying contributions that we required. And basically the $1, $5, and $9 benefit could be approved based on no change in additional funding request. But when you move from $9 to $10, you can see at the bottom of the table under the $10, you'd have to add $427,000 to the $20 million request to pay for a $10 improvement. You'd have to have $15 million to pay for a $15 improvement. The second thing about this is it's a benefit improvement from 170 to 171 or whatever the case may be. But it's also a member contribution. Any of those trigger an increase from the current $10 a month contribution requirement to $15 a month for all scenarios. Questions? Okay, register of deeds. Yep. And then contributory debt. Okay.
For register of deeds, I'm actually just going to speak to the results rather than what the presentation, just because not a lot happened, to be honest with that plan. So the funded percentage did increase from 154% funded to 157% funded. That was mainly helped along by the fact that this plan is so well funded, and on an actuarial basis, we recommend that there be no contributions both last year and this year, but according to statute, 1.5% of monthly receipts are still going into this plan. So it continues to perform well and is very stable.
On to the death benefit plans. Slide 2 will be an overview comparison last year to this year of the plans. And the teachers and state employees death benefit plan surplus increased slightly from 113 to 120. Local death benefit plan increased 0.6 to 80%. They're at surplus. Separation insurance benefits, That one decreased a little bit from 17 million to 13.4. There are a little bit of asset losses in these because these are in short-term investments. The interest rate, valuation interest rate is 3% for these. But the one we want to talk about mostly is the retiree contributory death benefit plan, which had an increase in the deficit. It was sitting at a deficit of 132.9. It had an increase in deficit to 177.7 million, so almost a $45 million increase to the deficit. There's a lot of dollars of liabilities, 1.5 billion. So small changes can cause swings in the deficit. There was an asset loss, 13.9 million. We had some a combination of mortality experience, more deaths than assumed were observed during the year, and then actuarial transition. We had some refinements in the coding and some other adjustments. On the next slide is a quick 10-year history of the surplus. This is not news. We've made some adjustments over the years, but it's grown the past 2 years. Mainly the first big growth is when we reduced the investment return assumption from 3.75 to 3%, starting with the 2020 valuation. And then we have another growth here to mainly the mortality experience and transition refinements that were made.
I'd suggest if you ever represent that, do it backwards. Unless people see deficit at the top left, they're assuming things are going in the right direction.
Oh, negative.
I see what you're
Understood. Okay. All right, on the next slide gives you relative, so present value of future benefits that we expect to be paid out of this plan is about 1.5 billion. We have current assets set aside of 286 million, and we're expecting present value of future retiree contributions to be about $1 billion. That does leave that pink unpaid for or deficit as we call it, 177 billion. And on the next slide, so that 177 million dollar gap. It's been 13 consecutive years of deficit. It's a gap between the assets and those contributions coming in versus the liabilities we expect to be paid out. There were some changes in April of 2016 to increase premiums going forward for March 1st, 2017 forward, and then decrease the interest paid on the return of contributions to 1.2% for those that died in the first 24 months of coverage. So in January, last January, so I'm told, board's directed staff, consulting actuary, study some alternatives. And we've had conversations and we're beginning to start to materialize. We expect to complete a study by January with some ideas about how to address the deficit.
Treasurer, who has the authority to change the employee contribution? Is that the legislature or this office? Oh, Sam does?
Sam has the ability to tell you that the board establishes the contribution rate for the retirees. And essentially, the genesis of the deficit was that there was a long period of time where the board did not adjust the contribution rate that's applied to new retirees. So the legislation that affects the plan does not allow the board to change it. Once someone is already retired, you can only change the rate that's charged to new retirees. And then you're further hampered by the fact that for a variety of reasons, you're not supposed to charge new retirees more than the cost of the benefit that they will eventually receive.
Yes, I'm sorry, say that one more time. You cannot charge more over,
so you can,
cumulative premiums cannot be more than the benefit.
It's three pieces. You can set the premiums for people once they retire, but once they retire, those are locked in.
Right.
When the board did not keep up with that process for a number of years. The other limiting factor is that you could adjust it mathematically. You could charge more for people retiring after a certain date, but then there are legal concerns revolving around charging retirees in the future more than the benefit would be worth to them in order to make up the deficit for the ones that are. So it's we had at one point looked at 17 different options. I know that we'll be the team is planning to bring those to the board. A call down list.
Speak up.
I think the team is planning to bring a call down list from 17 different ways to look at it, which is to some options for you to consider, but I don't think that there are any good ones. There's nothing that's an easy answer or a simple fix to it. It's a structural problem that's exacerbated by a policy mistake.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Linda.
I thought I printed another page last night, but I guess I didn't. Because I know when I retired, I signed up and it's $10 a month. But I didn't see anything that was $10 a month. But I think that's, I was trying to look in to see if I could find out. But I think that that's all I pay. So it didn't go up. But then I saw this other thing that was a scale and there was different time periods. Like if you were retired after 2017 or something, you know, it was different. And it appeared like there were different rates based on your age. I didn't know if it was, you know, if I retired at 52 and I was paying $10, then when I'm 62, I'm going to be paying $20.
I don't think it increases.
It doesn't increase.
Once it's just based on your
You
retirement.
have to speak up if you're going to answer.
No, the price you're given at the point you retire is adjusted for your age at the retirement, at the point of retirement. And so it doesn't increase or decrease after that point.
But on that form, so if I retired at 65 and they made that adjustment, it could be that I'm maybe paying, somebody said, this person that does retirements with our organization, she said a lot of people were paying $25 a month.
Okay, why would somebody be paying 25? Why would somebody be paying 10?
If someone retired at age 52 or 55, they would pay less money than someone who retired at age 65.
But there's a longer period of time you're going to collect the
You're
premium.
going to collect the premium, yeah,
Right, okay.
because there's like these different stages that were listed.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Is that it? All right, so thank you all. Before we go into next week, we're back to our vows again. So do I have a motion from a member of the state board to accept the 2021 actuarial evaluation for TSERS, judicial, legislative, disability income plan, National Guard pension fund, and the death benefit plan? Thank you, Vernon. Second.
I'll second.
You defer, I guess. Motion second being made by Ms. Linda. Any further discussion?
I thought,
Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
no, Jeff did. Jeff said it first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 seconds, I don't care.
No, he was waiting.
Both be seconds.
Oh,
Right.
he was second.
Clerk call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer,
Aye.
Barbara Gibson,
Aye.
thank you.
Aye.
Stuart Sherman,
Aye.
thank you. Greg Patterson,
Aye.
thank you. Jeffrey Winstead, John Eppinghausen,
Aye.
Joshua Smith, I didn't hear Joshua Smith. Joshua Smith,
Probably out on the call in Statesville.
Lance Brewer,
Aye.
thank you, Mr. Brewer. Margaret Reeder,
Aye.
thank you. And Oliver Holly.
Aye.
Thank you, TSERS board members. And now I'd like a motion from the LGERS board to accept the 2021 actuarial evaluations for LGERS, registered firefighters, and rescue
Squad Workers Pension Fund and Death Benefit Plan. Do I have a motion?
So
Clea
moved.
Jackson, so moved. Clea Jackson, second.
All right, motion second being made. Thank you, Sheriff. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Aye.
Brenda Howardson. Not here, Brenda Howardson. Homer Dearman.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morse. Did not hear Mr. Morse. Kevin Gordon.
Hey, this is Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Thank you. Melody Brady.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Vaughn. Mayor Vaughn. Did not hear Ms. Vaughn. And Tony Brown. All right. And Bernard Gammon.
Thank you, members. Rick, we're going to have a short presentation from Patrick Hall. Thank you all. Traveling mercies. Dr. Winston-Salem. Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are on agenda item 18, a brief informational update for the boards. By statute, the contribution-based benefit cap, which is the anti-pension spiking requirements, can apply to retiring members only if their 4-year average final compensation is greater than or equal to a certain amount. And we call that amount the threshold for administrative purposes. If someone's average final compensation is less than the threshold, pension spiking rules do not apply to them. And if their average final compensation is greater than the threshold, pension spiking rules may apply depending on additional math that has to be done. The threshold was set by law at $100,000 in 2015, and it increases every January 1st for inflation based on the most recent June over June inflation measurement. For retirement dates this year, 2022, the threshold is $116,366.68. The increase in inflation from June 2021 to June 2022 was 9.1%. Therefore, next year, the threshold will increase by 9.1% to $126,956.05. And that new threshold will apply to all retirements effective in 2023. That's roughly $127,000. A new retiree will have to have average final compensation of at least $127,000 roughly 2023 in order for the pension spiking rules possibly to apply to them.
Any questions about that? Sam and legislative staff, and I don't know if Timothy left, but I want to thank Timothy for all his work. Would you mind doing that, please, David? And others in legal are working on a lot of issues regarding pension spiking. And so we appreciate that report. Stay tuned for what comes out of that. We're now to our public comment section. We have two folks who have joined us, Jamie Robinson and Cliff Johnson. If you will come up and to those chairs, identify yourself. Welcome. We're in all the branded bling today from Scenic. So in case you don't recognize where they're from, and y'all can arm wrestle on who's going to go first.
My name's Cliff Johnson. I'm the Western Region Representative and the District 2 Chair from the Western part of the state, represent the 31 westernmost counties on the board, board governors and executive committee. We're here today to ask y'all, first of all, we wanted to thank Treasurer Falwell and the staff here at the Treasurer's office and this board for the strides y'all have made in securing and making our retirement system as stable as it is today. We've come a long way, got a little ways to go, but we appreciate what y'all have done. With that said, retirees, we have not had a COLA, a true COLA, not a bonus, a true COLA from the retirement system since 2007. So we're here today just to ask y'all to please consider the price of milk. I'm looking forward to Senior Day at Harris Teeter.
That's today.
So unfortunately, I'm in Raleigh. So
You and I are old enough, but she's not.
that's true. That's true. But we just wanted to ask y'all to please consider whatever steps you need to take or whatever policies and procedures need to be done to recommend and give a true cost of living increase. The bonus is nice. It helps. But one medical bill, it's gone. The price of gas is still way up there. So the one-time bonus is nice and it helps, but we haven't had a true COLA and a cost of living adjustment in quite some time. And we're just here to ask that y'all do whatever procedures you need to take to consider giving us a true COLA. Thank you for what y'all do.
And since you identified yourself from Western North Carolina, we are convening the local government commission at Western Carolina University next Tuesday afternoon. It's only the second time it's ever been away from this room or Raleigh. It was in Terrell County last month and at Coley on November 1st. So welcome to visit with any of those folks. I'll be out there Monday and Tuesday teaching a class at School for the Deaf in Morganton and then heading more westbound and with other appointments. So glad to see you on November 1st or anytime.
I've spoken on the HCA issue.
I'll be talking a lot about that when I'm out there. So anytime in that 36 hours that you need to reach me or want to know where my bearings are, glad to see you. Thank you.
I'm Jamie Robinson. I'm also from the West. Clifford had hit everything I was wanting to speak of, but I'd like to say thank you to the treasurer's office and thank you guys that serve and ladies on this board. Thank you for everything you do. But I must say, after hearing all the reports today, that I know there's a lot of things, moving parts and pieces before it comes together, or on the retiree side of the house from the reports out here. So I'm asking because I feel like I need to ask. Retirees do need a true COLA. And I know when that's possible, we'd like to have that. So I'll be back next year and the next year, still asking. But thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing us to come to you.
You're always welcome here, and we appreciate the relationship we have with Scenic. And we had Scenic Day here a couple of weeks ago and ran out of chicken biscuits in the first 30 minutes. So it was a good day to buy stock in Bojangles that day. So, but thank you for what you do. And just to remind everybody that's listening by phone and otherwise that we're obviously in open enrollment. I'm going to make another plea, even though this is not the purview of this board. I chair the State Health Plan Board. We have 150,000 retirees over the age of 65. I'll be there next year. And we have done an incredible job at the State Health Plan in offering our retirees the Humana-based product at zero premium, which is really a 90-10 product actuarially. Zero premium for them, $4 a month premium for their dependent, no cost to the taxpayers. About 85% of our retirees are on that plan. But the other 15% has a actuarial cost of about $126 million a year. Everybody shifts over the age of 65 and everybody needs to make a decision that relates to their personal situation. But if everybody were to shift to the Humana product, zero cost to them, zero cost to the taxpayers in the State Health Plan, it will give us some juice to possibly, instead of just freezing the family premiums on the State Health Plan, which we've done for 5 years, actually lower family premiums. Because we are not attracting, going back to actuarial joy, we are not attracting enough young, healthy families onto this plan to offset people my age, your age. And that's what we need. And all we can do is take advantage of our largeness. And we've done that with the pharmacy benefit contract. We've done that with the Medicare Humana product. So anybody that you talk to in the last few days of open enrollment, you can encourage to go to the Humana plan. I hope they will consider doing so. Because if we are unable to break the healthcare cartel, and in Western North Carolina, what that really looks like and feels like today. And them coming to the table to give us the savings that we deserve based on the sheer size, based on the sheer fact that we are their largest customer. We are everyone's largest customer. HCA, Atrium, Trine Medical, across North Carolina. That's why more people on this humanitarian plan, the better off we're going to be. So do that word out to Western North Carolina, that'd be great. And look forward to seeing you. We'll go around robin right quick. Those on the phone, if you'd like to say anything as we move to adjourn.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Oliver Holly. Hope you can hear me well. I
Yes,
do the
sir.
same thing every meeting. I want to thank all of the educators in the state of North Carolina, all the superintendents, the teachers, the staff, our bus drivers, everybody that opens the door and makes school work. But today I ask a special thought and prayer. If you would keep the Elizabeth City Public School, actually Elizabeth City Pasquotank Public School system in your thoughts and prayers under the leadership of Dr. Keith Parker. Specifically within the last 11 days, they have had 2 medical emergencies at one school so far, leading to 1 student in critical condition and losing another student about 10 days ago. So if you would, just everyone that believes in the power of prayer, just keep a special moment in that conversation that you have with the big man and the big woman upstairs to pray for the Elizabeth City Pasquotank Public Schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. I was in Elizabeth City last week for other issues regarding to my chair of the Local Government Commission. So I absolutely agree with you, and our prayers will be with them. Thank you for always bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone?
This is Margaret Reeder.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I want to say thanks to everyone for all the time and energy that they commit to this board, and really want to thank the Treasurer's Department, the retirement system, for making an effort to make sure beneficiaries are correct when a member passes. I had the experience that example that Treasurer Farwell said, that when a member passes and the member has been married several times, a time or two, and hasn't changed beneficiaries. So I thank you for getting that correct, or making the effort. And I want to say I appreciate my bonus this month and my pension. It sure would be nice to have it every month, but based on Patrick, Greg, and Buck's reports, I don't have a lot of hope. However, I will not shoot the messenger, but thank you for the information. And y'all have a good day.
Thank you. Director Gibson.
Thank you. Like everyone else, I'm always impressed at the preparation that you bring to the meeting with all of your metrics and measures of your productivity, because we all appreciate all the work and the many people you serve, and just the sheer volume of it is impressive. So thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to work to have better service wherever you can. That's totally appreciated. I will echo what everybody else has said, and I've said before, you know, when times have been tough for state employees, I think they understand that, you know, money is not going to come flowing in from the taxpayer dollar. But after the great year that we have, and we know that there's maybe some, you know, downturn expected, but we do trust our actuaries. We do trust that your investments are going to continue to be positive, and I would hope that everybody here thinks long and hard between now and January, and hopefully when we come back, we can do something to have some sort of a COLA presented for all these deserving retirees. We had the Governor's Awards for Excellence Tuesday this week and celebrated, it was 182 winners, a record, including a huge group of COVID-19 response out of DHHS. And I think it's just a good time to reflect on all the great work that state employees do. And it would be great to take care of them when they retire. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Hope everybody has a great week.
Director Gibson, do you want to put a plug in for open enrollment for the flex plans, please?
Oh dear, of course, yes. Just like state health plan. Thank you for that. Gosh, I fell off. The open enrollment will be ending tomorrow as well, and there are some new improvements, additional plans, some new wellness benefits that people can take advantage of. So I encourage everybody, even if you've already enrolled, if you didn't look at those closely, go back and look closely. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say to Director Gibson and especially anybody who's within earshot that is working for the state who has a small family, young family where they're paying for childcare. There's a 30% discount in childcare if they budget correctly and take advantage of our flex accounts, because they can put money pre-FICA, pre-Social Security, pre-tax into these flexible spending accounts. And with the rising cost of childcare, it's the single most important thing that anybody can do in the open enrollment process is figure out what that cost is going to be, have that money taken out of their paycheck pre-tax. It's a big positive deal. And so I know that Director Gibson talks about that a lot as she talks about the pledge plan. So Director Gibson, the Governor's Awards when was that held?
They were on Tuesday. We ended up having to do it at Meredith College. But I'll also add, thank you, Treasurer, for adding that about dependent care. Same for health care. It gives people a huge discount if they don't use it, if they do use it.
So the Governor's Awards were this Tuesday?
Last Tuesday, 2 days ago, yeah. Yep.
I had it down on my
We
calendar.
have videos. Yeah, we have videos online. You can look at the videos for all of the honorees. They're inspiring. They really are.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Anybody else on the phone? Okay. Anybody in person? Mr. Brand, starting that way.
I'll extend the usual kudos to both you, Mr. Treasurer, and to Mr. Causey and his staff as well. It's always, when I come here, it's always very informative because it helps me to have a better understanding when I can go out and talk to folks and give them explanation as to what's really happening. And it helps to be able to, at least in my mind, talk intelligently because I have a little better understanding of what's going on. Help people understand too about even like their contribution, why it needs to go up or why we're doing what we're doing. So it's valuable, and I appreciate Patrick and everyone else here for all that you do to keep us, at least give us the appearance of being smart. So thank you for that. Thank you for
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
This being my last board meeting, I'd be remiss if I didn't state publicly that it's been a true honor serving on the board, first under Treasurer Cowell and most recently under Treasurer Falwell's leadership. And if there's anything, my biggest takeaway, I should say, over the last 7 years is that remarkable things happen in this building. From 54 million trades to billions of dollars of checks going out, and they're all being done to serve state employees and their families. And Treasurer, my very last comment I'm going to leave you with, if someone ever does call here to book a cruise, I know they're going to be treated with courtesy, they're going to be treated professionally, they're going to get a great value on that cruise.
Thank you. Still not IC.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Well, after my report today, we'll talk about that later. I may not be. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your service. Linda?
Well, I just want to say that our educators have been really excited about their increase. And we kept telling them it was 4%, and we had a local president down actually in Gaston County, and members were calling thinking that they got too much. And so she was trying to figure it out. And I said, well, but it's 4%, because I think they were afraid that they were going to get too much money. They're going to have to pay that back, that extra percent. And I reassured them that no, that 4%, because like you said, or somebody said, it was the highest increase we've had. I guess definitely overall in supplements, and I don't know how many years, maybe in the history of the system. So everybody appreciates that. But you know, next year we're going to be coming back and we're going to be talking about a COLA too. We're going to keep leaving on that high, because right now this week is a good week, and you talk about the positive. And I was really excited about our new actuaries and the presentation you made. And one thing I like that we've mentioned before is you even talk like how much a supplement would cost, and then you know, could we get a COLA, and you know, and how much money, and trying to lay it out for us. And well, maybe we don't have enough investment returns, but you just laid it all out and actually mentioned it, and that's what we really wanted to see. And I think we didn't get that before, so I think Barbara was interested in that as well. And so I put that down on my list. And then the staff, I just see how they're improving their customer service. They came from not being able to find people, that hired 11 people, and just how they move people around and get everybody served in the state. So you've got great people working here. And everywhere I go to, I also push for the Humana plan. I tell people about it, and I always looking for new ideas. And when I got back, I was out of town for a couple of weeks. My TV was on channel 1. And it was an infomercial that kept running about Humana. Oh God, you know, you're not supposed to talk to Joe Namath people. I tell everybody, but it wasn't Joe Namath, but I knew there was something fuzzy with these people. And I called and I went through the conversation, and then we got down to the formulary, and several medications they didn't cover at all that I needed. And one was going to be $500 a quarter, and I can get it with the mail order for $80. And he couldn't believe it, you know, and he said, well, I guess, you know, you're out. He knew right there that we had a really good drug plan, and theirs just didn't make it. But what I'm thinking is when people call in, they think they're going to get that $100 back a month, and they're talking about the dental, and they're talking about all those things, and they don't get down to talking about the formulary. And so I came up with a new example that I could share with people, because I wasn't going to sign up. You know, I'm in the plan, and I tell everybody else about the plan. And I think that's the greatest thing for retirees. You're going to have surgery. It's not going to cost you an arm or a leg. We don't have any deductible, and I just sell it. And I really appreciate Treasurer Paul getting into this Humana Advantage plan, because it's been a really great thing for retirees. And like you say, you wish you'd have it for people under 65 too, but it's a really great thing for the seniors. So
I'd like to have it just for people who are retired between 53 and 65.
oh, and yeah, it definitely would, because when you have surgery, then you're always thinking you got the deductible, all that co-insurance you've got to pay. You're looking at $5,000 just for surgery, and people can't afford it.
It's a transfer of wealth from working people to the healthcare cartel. So
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
And I'm going to work on those other problems.
Thank you. Jeffrey.
Great big thanks to staff. They sure do make you look good.
We've already thanked the operational staff. I'd like to first thank Buck. I agree with your assessment. He talked to us like I say humans, but like high schoolers, as opposed to like trained actuaries. Easy to see the products, easy to understand where you're going with it. Appreciate it. Also appreciate the meeting with Thomas and Patrick, discussing kind of where we are with the guard pension plan and the way ahead. And I'll probably send some more emails as well as some to Rick on some orbit possibilities. So, again, appreciate all your team is doing, sir.
Thank you, Treasurer. A couple of things I'd like to bring up. Officer that got killed in Raleigh, like for everybody to remember him in prayer. We met with the family last week. We have set up a GoFundMe page for him. So if you go to that GoFundMe page, it's been set up. I got a 2-year-old that's just starting his life. So remember that family in prayer. And also I'd like to report to the board that the governor on September 30th, he spoke very highly of this board. He actually gave me honor for my firefighting service and everything. He gave me the Order of Long Leaf Pine on September 30th, and I was very humbled to receive that, but he did speak highly of this board.
Very much. Just a few quick things. Number one, we'll adjourn our meeting in honor of Gabriel Torres that you just mentioned. Also, we heard yesterday of the passing of Stan Elrod. Stan Elrod was a principal at Reynolds High School, at Reagan High School. He was a candidate for the school board in a district race, and he was going to be elected in a couple of weeks. And Stan died unexpectedly a day and a half ago. So keep his family and our community in thought and prayer. Last two things. Everything we do here is an effort to preserve and strengthen and sustain this plan for this and the next generation of public service workers. I want to thank all staff for making that happen, and especially Elizabeth and Lisa for doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to make all this work. And lastly, just in this time, especially holiday period, it's been worse since COVID. Our blood shortage in North Carolina continues to be a problem. And if you're as physically conservative as I am, it's simply the cheapest, best way to ever get a physical, is to go get blood. Because the analysis that the Red Cross does on your blood is amazing. Meaning if something's wrong with you, they'll tell you about it. So if you're as big as I am, you can donate double reds, which means that you only have to give half as often. And I'm up to 186 pints of blood. So, you know, when you stick you half as often at my age, it's probably better. So if you have it in your heart and in your body to donate blood anytime of this holiday period, I really suggest you doing so. And as I always say regarding this issue or organ donation, if you would take one, you should be willing to give one. So if you would ever take a pint of blood, you should be willing to donate a pint of blood. So with that, we will adjourn in honor of Officer Patrolman Torres, Stan Elrod from Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and any of our other public servants that have lost since the last meeting. With that, I'll entertain a motion from the teacher's board to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion, second by first by Vernon, second by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Is that second by Mr. Ebbinghausen or Mr. Winston? All right. Mr. Treasurer?
Aye.
Barbara Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you. Dirk German?
Aye.
Thank you. Greg Patterson?
In 7 years, I've never opposed anything, and I'm not going to start now.
Mr. Winstead? Aye. Joshua Smith? Joshua Smith? Lynn Brewer?
Aye.
Didn't hear Lance.
Aye.
Linda Gunter?
Aye.
All right. Margaret Reeder?
Aye.
Thank you. Oliver Holly?
Aye.
Okay, adjourn. I'd like motion from the elders board, please.
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved, Homer Dearman.
Second,
Okay,
Mr. Brewer.
Mr. Brown made a motion, second by Mr. Dearman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Treasurer?
Aye.
Brenda Howerton? Clea Atkinson?
Aye.
Thank you. Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Jeffrey Morse? Kevin Gordon? Didn't hear Kevin. Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Thank you. Melody Brady? Melody Brady? Didn't hear Melody. Mayor Vaughn? Mayor Vaughn? All right. Tony Brown? Motion. Vernon Gallen?
All right. Okay, thank you, and we're hereby adjourned. Have a great day.
It's at my-
Right.
One of our